I now call to order this special meeting of the Anchorage Assembly. It is Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Ms. Allard. I believe Ms. Allard is here. We'll come back to her. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Ms. Kennedy. Here. Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Ms. Zolotel. Here. Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Here.
Understand Ms. Quinn Davidson is excused this evening.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Kennedy, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Dunbar, would you read the land acknowledgement, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It is an actionable statement that marks our collective movement towards decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to those of you here in the chambers or those of you joining online. This special meeting picks up where we left off at last week's regular meeting of March 15, and I just want to say thank you to Ms. Zolotel for chairing and Mr. Rivera for vice chairing. I was ill last week, and Vice Chair Constant was in DC at a conference. So we will be starting with the items that were pulled from the consent agenda. Before we begin, I do want to recognize the tremendous service and legacy of Congressman Don Young. Congressman Young devoted most of his life to serving his community and all of Alaska. We honor his dedication to the people of Alaska, and we celebrate his love for our great state. Our hearts go out to the Congressman's family and friends during this difficult time. Congressman Young was an Alaskan icon, and we mourn his loss. The clerk's office has drafted a resolution honoring the congressman. All assembly members and the mayor are invited to join as sponsors. It's expected that, or intended, that the resolution will be submitted for the agenda of the April 12 regular meeting. And a final note before we begin our business, we continue to keep the APD officer who was shot and seriously injured on Friday in our prayers and thoughts as he begins to heal and recover. And I just express deep gratitude for those who continue to put themselves in harm's way as they serve and protect the public. And with that, we will move on to our first item on the agenda, which is item 4A. Again, these were items that were pulled off of the consent agenda. I don't have complete notes as to who pulled each item, so in those instances, I will just go to the mover after we have a motion and a second. We now have before us item 4A, Assembly Memorandum number AM 155-2022, Anchorage Transportation Commission appointments. What is the will of the body?
I move to postpone this item to the 12th of April.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion has been made by Mr. Constant to postpone this item to the meeting of April 12. It has been seconded by Mr. Perez-Verdia. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. There was another item that, just by virtue of the fact that it had a 10-day notice period, so it's not on this agenda, that I was hoping we would have a work session on the future and what is the plan for the Transportation Commission. So I would just ask members to join me in postponing this item to the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Go ahead, Mr. Weddleton.
I think it's a question for Mr. Constant then. So is this because we generally wait 10 days and we have not on this, or?
No, the
Go ahead,
10-day,
Mr.
thank
Constant.
you. The 10-day issue is another item that's not on the agenda today because of the 10-day requirement. This one is because we've had lots of conversation about what's the future and fate of this commission and how is it supposed to engage on the question of taxis and other issues and the whole transportation department. And so I'm just asking members to give us time for one work session to talk about that.
If I might, someone with the city. Can I ask a question, Chair?
Mr. Wilbur, who I believe is acting as Muni Manager for this portion of the meeting.
All right. So do you know if the Transportation Commission can they field a quorum at this point?
Through the chair, Mr. Welton, no, they cannot fill a quorum. There's currently one active serving member on the Transportation Commission, and the other 6 are currently volunteering, although they do not have authority to act on the commission.
If I would, just to drag that on, we've gotten a few emails, the price of gas has gone up dramatically, and the taxi people are looking for ability to do a fuel surcharge, and that would require, we could do something in Assembly, but ideally it would be through the commission. But if they don't even have a quorum, and if we wait 10 days, kind of narrows our options, I guess, either way, really. If these were passed, would they be able to have a quorum?
Through the chair, yes.
Well, I would recommend a no vote and we seat these people quickly. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So how many folks are on the commission? Well, I guess the real question is what constitutes a quorum?
Yes, through the chair. So the commission is made up of 7 members currently. Only 1 member actively is officially serving. Other members are sitting on the commission with not active appointments, as we've been trying to catch up with the boards and commissions, as you are well aware. As to what makes a quorum, I think that's probably a better question for legal.
I mean, I would imagine it's just a simple majority, which is
Yes.
4 out of 7.
Yes,
Okay.
if I can, yes, through the chair to follow up, yes, it's a simple majority out of 7, so that'd be 4 out of 7. This plus 1 member would make 4, technically.
Thank you. Then I guess my follow-up question, so I can better consider my vote on this, and I guess I'm thinking along the same lines as Mr. Weddleton. There is an issue that I'd like to see if I can get before the Transportation Commission ASAP. Do you know if there is any provision in code which would give the administration authority for those however many members that have lapsed for them to constitute a quorum for one meeting that's coming up in a week or whenever it gets called?
Through the chair, I believe that the mayor can continue appointments for 120 days, but I do not know specifically how long these commissions had lapsed. Maybe Mr. Wilbanks knows that.
Yeah, through the chair for that one. The Transportation Commission has commissioners who have lapsed from 2020 and commissioners who have lapsed in 2020 and 2021. So to simply put, that they are past the 120-day marker, that they would officially be no longer serving the ones that are on there. So the 120-day marker starts after October 14th, as you're aware, and then continues till this year, approximately February 11th. So regarding that, no, we do not have a quorum on here, and the members are not currently officially serving.
Okay, thank you. That answers all of my questions. I will consider my vote. For me, the most important thing is that we get this commission meeting ASAP so that they can consider some of the immediate issues we have before us. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to postpone AM 155-2022 to the meeting of April 14. The motion fails 2 to 8.
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Mr. Weddleton and seconded by Mr. Rivera. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 155-2022. The motion passes 9-1. We now have before us item 4B, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 156-2022, Youth Advisory Commission appointment. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Mr. Constant and seconded by Mr. Rivera. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. This individual, if you review their resume, is extraordinarily qualified.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 156-2022. The item passes 10-0. We now have before us item 4C, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 167-2022. I want to note this is accompanied by, or there is also AM 167-2022A, Anchorage Equal Rights Commission appointment. What is the will of the body?
Move the A version.
Second.
The A version has been moved by Mr. Constant and seconded by Ms. Zelatel. Mr. Constant?
This individual was appointed at the last meeting or the meeting before the last meeting, but they were confirmed into the wrong seat, so this clarifies the seat that they're confirmed into.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 167-2022A. The motion passes 10-0. We now have before us item 4D, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 157-2022, award of a 2022 grant in the amount of $100,000 to the Anchorage Park Foundation from the Parks and Recreation Department 2022 approved operating budget for annual contribution to APF volunteer activities and youth employment in parks program. What is the will of the body?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you. As per prior guidance from the Ethics Council and prior rulings from the chair, I'd like to declare conflict. So I serve on the board of the Park Foundation, and the prior ruling was when the Park Foundation is involved in sort of a large omnibus budget or, sort of attenuated through a park bond, it's okay for me to vote. But if there's a specific call out of the Parks Foundation, then I should be conflicted out. So I'd like to be excused.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. It is the ruling of the chair that you have a conflict and you may be excused. As Mr. Dunbar has left the room, what is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Ms. Zelatel and seconded by Mr. Constant. Ms. Zelatel, did you want to speak? No? Okay. I'm just going to go to the mover. Is there any discussion? Seeing no members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 157-2022. Item 4D passes 9-0. Ms. Zelatel?
For the next item, if you'd like to read it first, and then if you could call on me, please.
We now have before us item 4E, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 179-2022, sole source contract for wetland mitigation permitting services for the Navigation Center project from Dowell for the Municipality of Anchorage Community Development, $32,060. Ms. Zelatel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Per the advice of Ethics Council, I'd like to declare a conflict due to my employment as the interim executive director of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. It is the ruling of the chair that you have a conflict and may be excused for this item. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you. I can't seem to go into... I'm sorry. I seem to have been logged out and I can't log back in. I'd also like to be in the queue to speak to this item.
Okay, and before I go through the queue, I actually wanted to go to the municipal attorney, Ms. Christensen, and if you would speak to the conflict as declared by Ms. Zalatel.
Still
won't work.
Oh, there it is. Okay, we're good.
Thank you, Chair LaFrance. The Municipal Attorney's Office has determined Ms. Zalatel has a conflict of interest on this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen. And I understand, Mr. Dunbar, you were trying to get in the queue.
I think I'm in the queue now.
Okay. I see Ms. Domboski, and I'm assuming that's Mr. Wilbur. We don't have a motion on the floor, so Mr. Wilbur, were you wanting to speak to this item?
Through the chair, thank you. I think the administration would request that we can pull this item. We have a different mechanism in which to achieve this similar task. We're going to use our current contractor to do the wetlands, and we don't need a separate sole source, if you would entertain that request.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Wilbur. We don't have a motion on the floor, and typically we don't discuss until we have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I'll move to postpone indefinitely.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant, who has made a motion to postpone indefinitely and seconded by Mr. Weddleton. I'll go through the queue now. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to urge my colleagues to vote against this item. This project continues to be too large and to ignore the wishes of its neighborhoods. Also, it's permitting for a project that will ultimately, I believe, not serve well people experiencing homelessness. And actually, this process by the administration sort of illustrates things. Here was a chance where we maybe could have voted yes or no for this project to go forward, and yet again the administration has cut us out, and they're going forward regardless. So we, the public hasn't been able to really have a say on this project, and every time it's been presented to us, it's been a fait accompli. So I hope that the administration changes course and creates a smaller, more targeted facility that will better serve people experiencing homelessness and better serve the neighborhood. I would have voted no. I'll vote yes to postpone indefinitely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Weddleton?
No, I recommend a yes vote.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. I have two questions. First, Mr. Weddleton or Mr. Rivera, was this item spoken of in the facilitation?
Madam Chair? Thank you, Madam Chair. No, this specific item and request was not brought forward to the facilitation.
To the administration, who is the contractor that you're going to use? Under what contracting vehicle?
Through the chair, we're going to be working through the team that's helping us with initial design, McCool, Carlson, and Green.
So I'm going to enter onto the record that this was a bad faith action by the administration in violation of the terms of the facilitation. That this item to come forward is clearly a breach of that effort and its process to vet and bring forward items that have been understood by members of both sides of this agreement. And so that, in keeping with what Mr. Dunbar said, that it is now going to be done in-house and just done, is in fact a second layer that raises my concerns of the good faith of the negotiation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my comments have already been said.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. Mr. Weddleton?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is blowing it up into something it's not. We have known that the navigation center in that location could possibly have wetlands issues for the entire process. The footprint has been diminished tremendously as the proposal has gone from a 1,000-person shelter to a fairly modest 200-person shelter. The location for it is not on a wet area, so the project for analyzing the wetlands has gotten quite small. So to bring it in-house into an existing contract just makes sense. I mean, this is not news to anyone on the facilitated process, or I don't think it shouldn't be to any of us. We know there's wetland issues there. We knew when we were doing the bus barn there. So this is really very, very simple. It doesn't have sneaky implications or anything. I'm surprised to see that it's becoming that way. This is very simple. At any rate, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. All right, we'll continue through the queue, and hopefully we can get to a vote here soon. Mr. Rivera?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to clarify. So my answer to the previous question remains, did the facilitated process see this specific request for $32,060? No, the facilitated process did not. But did this idea in general get discussed in facilitated process? Yes, it did. I'm not sure, seeing as I am new to the facilitated process, if there is an agreement to bring these specific type of documents to the group prior to it coming to the assembly. That would be something I think worthwhile to discuss in facilitated process so that we don't wind up in this same situation again. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. And then Mr. Constant?
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton suggests it doesn't have sneaky implications. There are a number of people who read those reports for details, and if the details aren't there, then pretty much any project moving forward outside of the scope raises the question of, has this been vetted through the process? And clearly at this point it hasn't. And so to me, that's where I'm turning to get my record and understanding of what's within, because that's the record that we have and the rules that we have. And so know that if you have items coming through on the agenda that haven't been in those notes, then I am suspicious.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to postpone indefinitely per the request of the administration, AM 179-2022. The motion to postpone indefinitely passes 9-0. We now have before us item 4F, Assembly Memorandum number AM 175-2022, sole source purchase of pre-development costs related to Holton Hills subdivision from the Heritage Land Bank for the Municipality of Anchorage. What is the will of the body?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Constant?
I need to declare conflict.
Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
One of the developers of this project is my real estate broker. I don't think we need the questions. It's been a conflict before, it's a conflict now, it's going to be a conflict until the project is in the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Since you have previously gone through the questions and it has been the prior ruling that you have a conflict, it is a ruling of the chair that you have a conflict and you may be excused from this item. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Mr. Weddleton, seconded by Mr. Rivera. Mr. Weddleton?
I just want to speak a little bit on this. I support it. I think we should do it. It makes sense to keep Dow as the contractor on this for the reasons cited here. And just to note for people, this is a project that has garnered great interest in Girdwood because it's very dramatic. There's a lot of uncertainty, and in that community, people have a real, it's an amazing community, and they have great hopes and dreams for it, and they get nervous when projects, big and little, come up, and this could be transformative. This would, there are hopes for more housing in Girdwood, and this, potentially could bring that. That's what we're slowly moving towards. But the types of housing is always a debate. Will it be the workforce level housing that they desperately need there, or will it be more, absentee, owners housing? And that's something that we don't know yet. I mean, the process is working its way through, and those questions, will kind of unfold over time. And I think there's a real good understanding amongst the Assembly, administration, and particularly Heritage Land Bank that these problems exist and that they'll be worked on steadily over time. Infrastructure needs, workforce housing, and so on. So I guess I'm basically speaking just to acknowledge for any Girdwood people who are listening or might listen that, we hear that and we know that that's an issue and that this is a controversial project feared by some and looked forward to by others quite a lot. So I'm not going to put anyone on the spot on that. I guess that's just my little monologue on it. So I recommend support and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 175-2022. Item 4F passes 9-0. Next, we have before us an item for introduction. Item 5A, ordinance number AO 2022-42, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly waiving certain fees established in the Anchorage Municipal Code as an economic stimulus measure in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Third.
A motion to introduce has been made by Mr. Dunbar, with a second by Ms. Zelatel and a third by Mr. Constant. And Mr. Weddleton, I see you're in the queue.
Well, I'd like to set the public hearing for April 26th. Am I able to do that?
My motion was to introduce this on the 12th. I'm certainly open if it gets the 12th to postpone it until the 26th when we get there, but.
And I believe that I can just set the public hearing for that later date.
I want it on the 12th, though.
Oh, okay, understood. Mr. Weddleton, are you still in the queue?
No, I guess we're done on that one. We'll talk more about it on the 12th. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Weddleton. I see Mr. Burke, so I'm assuming that's Ms. Christensen? No, Mr. Trombley.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to request, I don't know if I want to request a work session, but I would like to chat with folks, some assembly members about this prior to the 12th, if that would be okay.
Thank you, Mr. Trombley.
And I'm sorry, through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, I'd be happy to discuss it at your committee as well, if that meets your timeline.
Thank you, Mr. Trombley. And as everyone on this body knows, just because we introduce something doesn't mean we will necessarily take immediate action. It's always hard to tell whether or not there'll be a need for work sessions or remanding to a committee. So is there someone else in the administration who is in the queue? I saw a few names flash up. Mr. Weddleton, you're apparently in the queue 3 times. Don't know how you managed that.
It says 0 on my computer here, so.
Okay, we will move on next to unfinished business and
Madam
unfinished.
Chair, I'm actually in the queue.
Okay, you were.
Maybe I got popped out somehow.
You were not showing up in the queue.
Dear Lord. Okay. Maybe I'm on the wrong one.
Ms. Allard, do you have a point of order or a point of information?
No, actually, it was in reference to what we were just discussing on 5A.
Actually, we did not have a motion in front of us, aside from the motion to introduce, and at the same time, Mr. Weddleton had put himself in the queue for that. So we actually do not have a motion in front of us to discuss right now.
Yeah, hopefully the administration, or not the administration, the body will do a work session. I have a lot of concerns. Thank you,
Thank you,
Madam
Ms.
Chair.
Allard. Next, we have item 6A, Assembly Memorandum number AM 135-2022, Executive Appointment, Planning Department Director Craig Lyon, Human Resources Department. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Ms. Zelatel and seconded by Mr. Constant. Is there any discussion? Mr. Constant?
Craig, this one's a hard one. Just kidding. Thank you. Please vote yes on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 135-2022. Item 6A passes 10-0. Congratulations, Mr. Lyon, and I understand that your swearing in will take place on another date. Thank you. We now have before us item 6B, Assembly Memorandum number AM 130-2022, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility Board of Directors appointment. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Ms. Allard and seconded by Mr. Constant. Is there any discussion? Seeing no members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 130-2022. Item 6B passes 10-0. We now have before us item 6C, Assembly Memorandum number AM 133-2022, Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals appointments.
Move to approve.
A motion to approve has been made by Ms. Allard
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Constant. Is there any discussion? Seeing no one in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 133-2022. Item 6C passes 10-0. We now have before us item 6D, Assembly Memorandum number AM 131-2022, also AM 131-2022A, Board of Adjustment appointments. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
The A version.
Second on the A version.
A motion to approve the A version has been made by Mr. Constant and seconded by Mr. Rivera. Is there any discussion? Seeing no one in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 133-2022A. Item 6D passes 10-0. We will now take up continued public hearings. We now have before us item 7A, ordinance number AO 2022-21, an ordinance authorizing disposal of real property legally described as lots 8Q through 12Q, Woodland Park Edition, Plat P-61A, PID 010-033-41, lots 1Q through 7Q, Woodland Park Edition, Plat P-61A, PIDS 010-033-06 through 010-033-12, Lot 6P Woodland Park Addition, Plat P-61B, PID 010-033-13, Lot 5P Woodland Park Addition, Plat P-61B, PID 010-033-14, Lot 4PA, Block P, Woodland Park Addition, 1947, Plat 77-298, PID 010-033-38, and Lot 1PA, Woodland Park Addition, 1947, Plat 65-19. Public hearing was reopened for this item on the meeting of February 15, 2022. It was continued from February 15, 2022 and carried over from the meeting of March 15, 2022. Madam Clerk, just to clarify, was the public hearing on this item closed?
Madam Chair, the public hearing was reopened.
Okay. It does state reopen. I just wanted to make that clear that the public hearing is still open. However, those who have already testified may not testify, although the body has requested to hear from the Turnagain Community Council. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak?
Hello, my name is Steve Montooth. I live not too far from the Rusty Goat, and I guess that's kind of a landmark these days. But I think anybody I talk to and they want to know where I live, that's the place. I live about 100 yards away from the Rusty Goat and another 100 yards away maybe from the pedestrian overpass. That's where all the parcels we were talking about. And I went over, I heard about all this through the newspaper, not any other place, so I'm a little concerned about that. This has been going on a long time and just kind of I'm not sure anybody else in the community has heard much about this. But besides that, I decided to go over to the property and look at it, and I've been over there long enough to know that when I looked down the alleyway there was all these light poles with transformers on it, really tall, so it looks like a lot of power is going into that community south of that very narrow alleyway. And I never knew exactly what these are, but they're some kind of circuit boxes. They're green, pretty good size, probably about as size of this table right here. And I noticed that's just south of the properties we're talking about. And so I thought, okay, well, after hearing about this, and since it's so close to my house, I decided to buy one of those big 100-foot long tape measures. And so I measured it from the Goat extended parking lot from the alleyway to the northern lights. It's about 155 feet. And I measured going down further to Barber Street, and that's about 380 feet. But I decided to measure it, about 150 feet, and that goes maybe 110. And then there's a circular roundabout that meets Barber Street, and Barber Street is the dead end there, and that to the Fish Creek bike trail is about 2 blocks. And I measured it from there, and it's 78 feet. And then where the overpass is, it's 20 feet till it meets. So in other words, it's where the land falls off at a 45-degree angle down to Northern Lights, and of course that's the overpass is where that happens. So I'm a little concerned about, with this development of property, it just gets narrower and narrower. So if we talked about a small little development like over the Rusty Goat parking lot, there won't be much room over there. Lots of room for folks who are using that park, including folks at the developmental area with the developmentally disabled folks who are on wheelchairs, we got a lot of people using it through a bike transfer. So I think we need to look for other reasons why, other places where we need to do some development.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome. Please come forward, state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the muni in which you live.
Hello, my name is Daryl Hansen. I'm in the Turnagain community there. I've lived on 29th for many years now, roughly 14, 15. The green space up for grabs happened to be this local community's backyard for many families around there. Many in the community enjoy and respect the local space for great family activities all year round, summer, winter. Ever since the rustic goats come to the area, we as a community have encountered a few more problems. But I think it would be greatly more, I can imagine, if we're getting rid of that family parkland. If parking lots are blowing up and whatnots, more apartment complexes. I went around and I spoke with a whole bunch of the neighbors around the neighborhood, and seems a lot of them didn't know. But everybody around that community's got a great concern for that too. The parkland disappearing and aren't pleased. And there's plenty of other vacant land areas in this town that seem to be more business oriented or complex friendly to appease the buyer maybe. Our community parks seem to be dwindling by economic greed. So maybe if you folks would take the time and help us in this community support the folks that have been raised or raising in that area. So since our parks seem to be fading away, hopefully we can keep some green land and not turn it into Los Angeles maybe. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any of the members of the public in the room here who wish to testify? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and go to the phone list. And if we could get the first person on the line, please.
Raised or
JJ?
Hi, is this Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Hi, this is Suzanne LaFrance with the Anchorage Assembly, and you are on for public testimony on AO 2022-21.
Thank you for your testimony.
Go ahead and state your name for the record and your community council or area of the community in which you live. You will have 3 minutes.
Sure. My name is James Brooks. I live in the Turnagain area, and I have participated with the Turnagain Community Council a number of times over the years. I guess some of the issues I'd like to talk about regarding the land is I participated in a land use discussion with the Turnagain Community Council a couple of weeks ago, and there's nothing wrong with, nothing bad about having green space. I think we all want green space. But I think we all just need to know what it comes at the expense of, because what really jumped out to me at the meeting that we had a few weeks ago was the historical use of the land. So, Kathy Gleason, who's been a real asset to the community, she did point out that there was interest in that land being preserved as green space, and I think that's a good thing. But what jumped out to me was when Adam Trombley brought photographs of what was there before, which was a series of apartment buildings, and they weren't small apartment buildings. I had such a vision that it probably had, small Turnagain ranch homes, but there wasn't that. There was 12 large apartment buildings, and those disappeared. And that was, and so the other thing that I think is really important to know is what's happened with the amount of housing that's available in Anchorage over the last 30 years. So in the decade from 1970 to 1979, there was 9,330 multifamily housing built. From 1980 to 1989, there was 5,758 multifamily housing built. And then in 1990 to 2000, there was 1,256. And in 2010 to 2014, it was half the amount of time, there was 382 units built. So what you've seen is this decline of 9,400 units to 382 units. During that period of time, though, that 30 years, we've had amazing, wonderful parks built in Anchorage, and I use them all the time. With the Coastal Trail, with Kincaid, with Hillside, with the single track trails, Anchorage has got amazing, wonderful parks, but what we don't have is we don't have new housing to accommodate a younger generation. We've got a housing crisis, and these are R3 lots. Now, in my experience, these would be very difficult lots to develop, as was a previous person that was testifying said, with where the electrical lines are, the narrowness of the lot, the slopes of the lot, you know, and potentially the quality of the soils. All that might end up with this place being green space into the future. But it's also what that comes at a cost at is potentially nice quality housing for a new generation that would use these extraordinary parks that our community has. So, you know, if the Assembly approved the sale, it would continue to be a process of replatting, of a lot of community involvement to try to build something that's contextually appropriate.
Sir?
But I just want to make sure we realize the cost of maintaining it the way it is.
Your time
Yes.
is up.
Great. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. I do have a member in the queue for you, Mr. Weddleton.
Yeah, thanks. So looking at the document here, we've got 25,000 square feet RO, 14,000 square feet B1A. So you've got about 40,000 square feet. So, I mean, you're a builder, a developer. I mean, how many, if you were to do something snug like Seth Anderson did on Cordova and 10th, how many units could you get on here? It's pretty hypothetical there, but.
You know, I haven't taken the time to do a real thorough analysis of what actually can be built there. The stuff that Seth has built, and I know Seth really well, I think what he built I thought is really pretty cool. Small, micro housing. I'm thinking probably micro units, but probably it'd have to be multiple units, multiple buildings kind of sprinkled through it. It's zoned R3. It will probably require a replat or else some kind of reciprocal parking agreements in order to get, amount of density to make it work. Now, I spoke with Cooking with Housing recently. I was talking to some of the developers there about how many units have been built in Anchorage this year, and I believe he said 51. You got to realize that's low-income housing tax credit deals. And there was a previous testimony that also said that we need to have green space at the expense of greed. If there was the ability for someone to make money in Anchorage, you would see construction in Anchorage. And we don't have any market rate construction in Anchorage. So, and the reason why is not very little money to be made. So, to answer your question, what can be built there is going to take a lot of money and site planning and community engagement to figure out what's the appropriate density, but also what can actually work. And I think it's going to require some medium density stuff, not unlike the Rustic Goat development, which I did. I think that there needs to be orientation so that intersection does have smaller commercial with, something that's, not as much traffic intensive. We learned a lot of lessons between myself and the planning department when we built the Rustic Goat because we wanted to do mixed use. Mixed use can't be done in the same way that it was done on the Turnagain Crossing site where the Rustic Goat is. So I think, to answer your question, it's going to take a lot of work, and I'm not quite sure what can be built there, but I'll undertake that in conjunction with working with the community, if I'm actually a developer.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weddleton?
I was looking for one number, but appreciate that. I know that was a challenge to get there. So there's a sense in this. So, our request here will the real estate department be allowed to sell it? That's our question here. But there's a suggestion that you are lined up to buy it. But are you aware of that? Is there any? We could say sell it and you put it out to the highest bidder, and there might be a process to say leave a little parkland and so on. Is that a concern for you?
It's not going to break my heart to not build on that property. The reason I built the Rustic Goat, and I'd like to back up in time a little bit, so I don't want this lost in time. When I put the property under contract, it was to build a coffee shop and a place where I could meet friends for a beer in the evening. It was not to build a restaurant. I also was going to build 12 apartment units there, not 6. In the process and working with the Turnagain community, the Turnagain community wanted a sit-down restaurant. So with me working with, my other partners in this, we said, do we want to actually do this? And it was in building that we ended up with the project we had, which ended up with the parking problems that we had. So what I did is when the Muni came to us and said, if you build out the parking lot, will you lease the land if you build it out? And we agreed to that. So my business partner did all the improvements on the parking lot so that we could get that, so we could kind of have a pressure relief valve. So I approached the Muni about buying what we were already leasing, just to make sure that we didn't have this continued problem in Turnagain, because it's legal to park out through the neighborhood, but that's not what anyone wants. So we solved that issue.
Mr.
So when I
Brooks.
approached the city about doing that,
Mr. Brooks? Hi, thank you so much for responding to Mr. Weddleton's questions. I think his questions may have been addressed.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. We'll move on to the next person on the phone list, and then we'll go back to in-person testimony.
Hello, this is Emily.
Hi, is this Ms. Neenan?
Yes, it is.
Hi, this is Suzanne LaFrance with the Anchorage Assembly. You are on for public testimony on AO 2022-21, and if you go ahead and state your name for the record, the area of the Muni or your community council, you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Emily Neenan. I am speaking as an individual tonight, and I'm a longtime resident of the Turnagain Community Council area. My husband and I live in a small apartment. It's one of many multi-unit housing buildings surrounding this land that's being discussed tonight. And I want you all to know that I do support an increase in small-scale quality housing in this town. That is not what I'm questioning. For this land sale, though, I urge you to consider that for decades this property has been essentially a park for the neighborhood for all the surrounding multi-unit housing units. And I ask that you make the development plans transparent up front before committing to the sale. Look at the impact of increased traffic in particular. The streets surrounding this land are narrow, and there are frequent accidents at the intersection, the nearest intersection to a thruway, which is Northern Lights and Turnagain Street. Yes, right by the Rusty Goat, but I don't have a problem with the restaurant, but there are a lot of accidents there. I know because I can see them from my living room. My request for you all tonight is before proceeding with any sale, get more information on development plans, make those plans available to the community council and the neighbors for input. I heard Mr. Brooks talking. He sounds like a very thoughtful developer. That's great. If he doesn't get the bid, that's a concern. But I really want to know what the plans are before the city disposes of property that have been essentially used as a park for a lot of the multi-unit housing that is right here in our pretty dense neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll go back to in-person testimony. Welcome. Please state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the Muni in which you live.
Howdy. As usual. Excuse me. I'm Noria Clark, Sand Lake Community Council. KPV is my guy. Thank you for everything that you do. I have a couple of questions here, which you guys I know can't answer questions, but I would like to know more information about this. There's no fiscal note here. So why is there no fiscal note on this? Number one. Number two, as a realtor, I would like to know why we are not trying to work on other development for Title 21. Why are we not trying to help out the people who are already trying to develop land? Number three, I'm not saying that we should or should not do this. I really don't necessarily have a complete opinion about this. But I think that we need to look at here is that selling off muni property, where does this end up going next? Where does this end up leading to when it comes to housing and subjugation of that? So what do we do then? Does it end up being a homeless shelter at some point? How are we going to handle this? Because right now we're drowning a lot of money in this and all of this homelessness, and we're not taking care of our citizens. So for me, I think that this needs to have a little bit more fiscal thought and a little bit more fiscal effort before there's a decision to be made. Because otherwise, we are not making a great decision for our community. Correct? Maybe, maybe not. So just some thoughtful notes to keep in mind. And I think that some of what the community is saying is important, but also, like I said, we have a lot of builders out there who are looking to try and get things passed through regulation through Title 21. Why are we not helping them right now? Why are we not moving through all of that business? Like I said, as a realtor, it's just a question for me. It's just a thought. Doesn't mean a whole lot. My thoughts don't always mean a whole lot, but it's just a thought. It's just a question. So, like I said, I don't necessarily have a particular stance on this. I just would like some thoughts to be heard and maybe decide about how you're going to try and improve this land. If you're going to take down trees and if you're going to take away space from people, which as a realtor I'm okay with to a certain extent, but there's a lot of things that need to be in question here. So thank you so much for your time, you guys. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for being here tonight. Have a great evening. I'm sure you guys will hear from me again. I'm sorry. I appreciate you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is now closed. Mr. Perez-Verdilla?
I move to postpone this item to the date of August 23rd. August 23rd. And if I could have a second, I'll explain.
Second.
So Mr. Perez-Verdilla has made a motion to postpone this item to August 23rd, and it has been seconded by Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Perez-Verdilla?
Thank you. There has been, as referenced in some of the testimony, a great deal of discussion about this in the community. There was a long meeting that was held. The Turning Community Council has met with the developer. Is my mic bad? Let's try this one. So the reason I'm asking for this time is that it feels very clear to me, based on all of these conversations, that the community simply needs more time. They need more time to discuss this. They need more time to work with the developer, and he, by the way, is all indication from what I've gotten, this is a developer that we want to work with and that the community wants to work with. I am, and I think most of the people I've talked to am in favor of doing something responsible with this land. But simply, the community is asking for more time. They're asking for more time to hold a few community sessions that they can come together and do some thinking and planning. So I ask for this time because they want to make sure that the snow can go away and they can spend some time on this land and make a good decision moving forward. So that's the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdilla. Mr. Weddleton?
I have a couple questions for administration, and if they're available, but also for Mr. Perez-Verdilla. So you say the developer. We have a question here, just should we make this available for sale and nothing more? I mean, it presumably could go out to bid or, just be put on the market. How does that throw a wrench into your...
No, I don't think so. We have a developer who's interested in it, whether it goes to him or not, but I'm just saying we have someone who has stepped forward and said that they're interested in developing this and working with the community, which is a positive sign. But the bottom line is that the community has asked for more time to discuss this and to do greater planning, and I think that they deserve the time to be able to take to make sure that they want to decide whether they wanted all this land to be disposed, whether they would prefer that part of it remains as parkland and part of it is developed.
So that's the request of the community, to have more time to work on this and then to come back forward. So.
Okay, can I ask some questions?
Go ahead, Mr.
Administration?
Weddleton.
I think I'm only in there once, but, so a couple of questions, whoever up there who could ask them. So, sold at market, sorry, just reading for the AM, would be sold at market rates in a manner authorized by Municipal Code 25.30.090. So, does that mean goes out to bid, or would it, I haven't read that part of code recently. Maybe you could give me the summary.
Sure. Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, Adam Trauma here. I can, as the real estate director, I have the opportunity to put it out to bid. I can enter into direct negotiations as well. Code allows me to do either or.
Okay. What factors would determine which way you went?
Well, we have an interested party, so that would be a major, that would be one way to go, because there's already somebody who's interested in it. So I would enter into direct negotiations more likely than sending it out to a competitive bid.
Okay, thanks. And then, so then reading on a little further, this line 32, parcels have economic potential through development or other community development actions. So what would be other community development actions?
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, some of that would be related to the preserving the parking, because right now that parking lot is not preserved. At any time that could go away, and then the community's back into the situation that they were previously. So this selling these parcels would help preserve that parking as well.
Okay, and then I guess one last one. So we have a proposal to postpone till August 23rd. So I guess your opinion on that, and then, I mean, the goals that Mr. Perez-Verdia said was, you know, to have the community input. So, you know, if the community came in and said, leave some portion of it as park, keep it under X number of units or something like that, is that something you could fold into the disposal?
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, the position on delaying until August 23rd, nothing's going to be built this year anyways, right? There's going to be multiple entitlement actions that happen on that parcel. Entitlement actions such as possible rezones, which ultimately end up back here, which can take upwards of 8 months. There would be platting actions possibly, which have to go to the platting board. Possible variances, which have to go to ZEBA. All of these are extremely public processes. And so being that we live in a northern climate and we can't build in January, the longer you delay, the further out you push, and so you could possibly kill next season as well. So really not looking until 24, 25, depending on what happens. So there's always that risk associated with that. I'm sorry, you'll have to remind me of your other question.
So if over the next 4 months or so, the community had requests, you know, that part of it be park and maybe put a cap on the number of units, the kinds of things that we see for rezones and such. But that, would you be able to fold those? I mean, could that, I'm just wondering, so if this was here in August, could be amended in saying the intent of this would be whatever things that come out of the process? I don't.
Well, I think it's possible. One of the challenges associated with that is that, I mean, just from an economic standpoint, if I was an interested party in purchasing that property, I probably wouldn't. I don't know how much time I would spend or how much money I would put into something that really isn't a guarantee. And so I think it's difficult to spend any kind of money and develop plans and to submit those to community councils without a guarantee that, hey, I'm even going to have a chance at this parcel. So there's some economics involved in that from a developer standpoint, but I think the Assembly can probably put limitations on things. That would be more of a question for legal as far as how much, but I think it's possible.
All right, thank you. So I guess my sense of we're in debate, right? So I had questions, right? Okay. So Mr. Perez-Verdia, I couldn't support putting off till August. I mean, if we could do it till the last meeting of May, things should melt by then. They're just going fast, but you know that would allow some season to get things rolling on this, and I don't know what, I mean, we hear from community councils that don't meet in the summer anyway, so.
Yeah, Mr. Weddleton, if it's okay with Madam Chair, I'd like the president of the Turnigan Community Council to come up, and she can speak to the time that the council has requested.
And we did ask last time that Ms. Brawley be allowed to speak, and so we'll go ahead and do that now, and then we'll go through the queue.
Thank you. My name is Anna Brawley, and I'm here representing Turnigan Community Council. So I won't read the full statement that I have, but just to give a brief report. So about a month ago, I testified on this land sale and asked for more time because no one in the neighborhood had heard about it. And also just to know that it was near an area that had a lot of controversy a few years ago. We talked about the rusted goat, and that it would cause a lot of friction, regardless of whether you guys had voted a month ago or if you decide what you want to do tonight. So I wanted to first thank Mr. Trombley for coming to our meeting on the 7th, answering our questions, providing background information. But I also wanted to say respectfully, the way this was brought forward was not effective, and it makes it harder even for the city to achieve its objective to sell these parcels, because it generated this controversy with no notice and no process. So we know that these parcels used to have housing on them, specifically apartments. We know that they've been used as parkland for decades. We also know that they were never legally dedicated for that purpose. And so it is legally within the city's ability to sell these if you guys vote to approve it. I've also heard a lot of comments across the spectrum in my neighborhood. I've had a lot of calls, emails. People felt like I was being lobbied, even though I'm not one of the votes, to say that I should lean one way or the other. I've heard people talk about housing. I've heard people talk about how they use the space, how they don't use the space. I've heard from folks who live nearby that they would like to see housing there. I've heard from folks who live nearby that they don't. So I guess what I would ask, and what we talked about in our March 7th special meeting, was to take a step back and use a better process. And so that is why we are asking for the summer, at least the summer, to basically work through a planning process that does not just start with a vote on a disposal of this property. There's a lot of questions. There's certainly a lot of uncertainty from neighbors. They don't know what's going to go there. It's not clear what can even be built there. You heard that from Mr. Brooks this evening. And I guess I also, just having watched this happen for several years within our council and just as a neighbor, I am personally just tired of the fighting over every single parcel that we try to change. I think it's not productive, I think it's dysfunctional, and I think that we can model a better way to do it. And so what we're asking, and again, I'm not saying that it should be sold, that it can be sold, that anything can be feasibly built on it. What I'm asking is to give us the summer to hold at least one community meeting at the property, so maybe hopefully when it's sunny out, when it's nice, when people can actually observe how that space is used. People can look at the views of the mountains, they can look at people going on the path, using that space, walking to Rusted Goat, biking, and to really step back and say, what is the best use of that land for our neighborhood? Because I think that's what's not clear. So a lot of people have opinions about it, a lot of people have, how it's been used in the past, and I think we very rarely engage in a visioning discussion and imagining what is possible.
Thank you, Ms. Brawley. And if you would be so kind as to grab a seat near the podium, I'm going to, because I suspect there will be questions for you, I'm going to go ahead and continue through the queue, and I recognize that some members had put themselves in the queue prior to hearing from Ms. Brawley, but may have questions. So we'll start with Ms. Zelatel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a couple of things I want to flag, that something I like to do when we're discussing postponement, because there are things that I would want to be resolved prior to it coming back. And this is specifically for Mr. Trombley, is right now the code section provides for 4 different methods of disposal potentially under this ordinance, and I would like to see the specific method of disposal brought forward to us, or justification why a specific method of disposal is not indicated, and then explained in the AIM and reflected in the statement of economic effects. Secondarily, the authorization to dispose property doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be developed quickly. And so I would want there to be real consideration and discussion about a reversionary clause if this is disposed of with no timeline, so that a neighborhood wouldn't be held in limbo for a decade, that it could be sold, not developed for some reason, and then suddenly developed. And I know reversionary clauses have been used previously within the municipality. As to the specifics of the extension, I do want more time. However, I am concerned with setting this out all the way to the end of August. It's extraordinary, frankly. We have not given other neighborhoods this kind of consideration, and we haven't had, and maybe there's a fundamental flaw in the code and the process, and we need to examine that. But this would set a precedent that I would say we would need to give to all neighborhoods. I know Midtown would love the opportunity to hold site visits and wait till the snow clears and do things like that so that everyone could see how the property might be used. And so in fairness, I think we need to strike a better balance on the extension. So I'm open to hearing suggestions if my colleagues have them along the way during debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alatel. Next is Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a couple concerns, and I agree with Ms. Alatel on the extent of when we would postpone this to come back forward to us. One of my concerns was, and Mr. Tremblay addressed it when he stated that the development season, the longer we postpone it, the lack of housing we have. Anchorage is not growing as far as land size. And I've heard from my colleagues over and over for the past few years that we need to continue to develop so that we can get people into housing, and it's a cycle. So when people, first-time home buyers, they can move up, and then they buy, and we can get people off the streets. We can get them into their own homes. So it's a concern to me that we would postpone until August. I find that's a really long time. But we do have a housing crisis in our community right now. This development is not just, the lack of is the postponement just doesn't affect Turning an Arm. It affects our entire municipality and everybody looking to become a homeowner or being able to move on and move up. So with that, I would like to make an amendment to Mr. Perez-Verdia's recommendation from August. I think you said 24th, Mr. or Cameron. I would like to move it. This allows the community council to meet at least twice. And Ms. Brawley, can you tell me what date, do you guys meet on the 7th of each month? Or what, not the 7th, but what Tuesday, first Tuesday of the month? Or
We meet the first Thursday.
First Thursday? So if we could move it, would you be, Ms. Brawley, I'm going to ask you, would you be okay with May 10th? And it allows the community council to get together twice and then bring it back forward. So with maybe your recommendations, what you guys are thinking and feeling. That gives you guys 60 days, but it also gives you 2 more community council meetings.
Thank you. Our original recommendation was October 11th, but I understand the feasibility of that. And I would say that there are other things on our agenda for April, but if we need to make it work, I believe we could do that in May.
So Madam Chair, I'd like to motion for 10 May.
Second.
Okay. An amendment to the amendment has been made by Ms. Allard to change the date to May 10, and it's been seconded by Mr. Constant. And you have already spoken. Thank you, Ms. Allard. So I'll go through the queue. I'm going to go next to Mr. Constant since you've not spoken yet, and then to Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Thank you. I'm a big park supporter and I'm a big housing supporter. And those things are sometimes in tension with each other. We have a housing crisis. We have a homelessness crisis. We have a shortage in housing. We have a blowing up market in housing costs because there's nowhere for people to buy. But we're not in a park shortage. Within a very short walking distance of this location, there are the following parks that I was able to determine: Old Hermit Park, Little Park, Fish Creek as a whole, Barber Street Park, Woodland Park, Muriel Park, Kiwanis Fish Creek Park, Balto Sapala Park, Lloyd Steel Park, Dilica Park, Linary Park. Anchorage Coastal Trail for miles, Marston Drive Park, Pete's Park. There are so many parks here. So I hope that we strike a line towards resolving the crisis we're facing as a community, which is figuring out how we're going to develop housing in this community. So I strongly support the idea of shortening this timeline. This project, if you look at your agenda, was before us in February, all of March. Now it's going to be all of April and a good part of May. That's half a year almost of time, for sure over a quarter, in which this item is before us for contemplation. I don't disagree that it could have been managed somewhat differently to eliminate some of these hurdles on the front end, but here we are, and I strongly support the idea of let's get more housing in this town because it will start to resolve the crisis we face. So I urge support for this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Perez-Verdilla.
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification. Can I move to amend the amendment? Is it at the point, is it beyond that?
We're beyond that.
Beyond that, okay. All right, so what I will say is that, we have a community that has come together and asked...
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you. The clerk has reminded me that we have a main motion of postponement and then only an amendment. So yes.
So I would...
Sorry about that.
Thank you. I would really like to strike a balance here, respecting the community and also respecting the idea that we need to move on this as quickly as possible. So I would like to amend the amendment to postpone to, I'm losing my track here, to June 7th. I think that that's a fair balance.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Thank you.
Seconded by Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Perez-Verdilla.
Thank you. I actually think that the body is pretty much in line here. I know that this is longer than I want as well, but because I'm anxious to see this this land developed responsibly, whether that's a partly park, partly housing, whatever that is. And I think we have a very unique opportunity to have a developer who's come forward, who lives in the area, who cares deeply about the community, and who's willing to work with this community over the next few months to do this planning. So I think that we need to move forward with this and give them the time. I also really want to thank Ms. Raleigh, who has, as she said, fielded more phone calls than some of us do in an average month on this topic, and I think it would do a lot to help this community heal and for them to come together and do some visioning and think about what the future of this land should be, and it could very well set a precedent for how they work in the future in terms of other projects that happen within this community. So I would encourage my colleagues to support the amendment to postpone to June. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdilla. Mr. Trombley, are you in the queue?
I am, but not speak to the motion. I can speak after the motion's voted on. I'd like to speak to the main topic. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Trombley. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I seconded this because when I was thinking about the fact that we probably need to move up sooner and make a shorter time frame than the August 23rd date, it was the June 7th idea that kind of stuck in my head. So not that I have any real concern that the community council couldn't do what they need to do in that 60-day period, but it does give at least the opportunity to even hold a couple more special meetings if that were the case, if that was needed. So I guess we'll just see what the rest of the body believes about the June 7th day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Ms. Zelatel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate wanting more time. I've heard the reasons why. I've heard the reasons why around talking with a particular developer. I'm having a little bit of a hard time getting there because the proposition to dispose this property isn't for a direct negotiation with an interested party. It's wide open. So if there's the interest in basically saying that's what we're going to do, then that would be very different. I guess I want to clearly, if we're going to take this time, I want to clearly set the expectations of what the ultimate action is going to be. So I guess I'm going to ask the administration, is this going to come back under 25.30.090A to direct negotiations, so that way the community has the expectation and we know where we're headed. Thank you.
Through the chair, Ms.
Go ahead, Mr. Trombley.
Thank you. Through the chair, Ms. Zolotel. One of the challenges I have with specifying that is that when the Assembly gives the real estate director the authorization to dispose of property, they give it to that individual based on the code. Now, it may very well be that a particular individual or developer who's interested in the property today may say, you know what, I've done my due diligence, this no longer makes sense. And we've put in an ordinance to dispose of the land under direct negotiations. What that has now done is that now that's hamstrung me in this case, or any future real estate director to dispose of the land under a competitive bid process, or to give it, or to sell it less than market rate to, say, a nonprofit. So that's why I'm hesitant to support hammering it down, because it may very well be that it doesn't work that way in this situation. But once the disposal has been given, the authorization to dispose has been given, it gives flexibility on how it can be disposed of in the future, whether this one works out or not.
Go ahead, Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Trombley. With that, I wouldn't support even the underlying item, because what I want is clarity on what we're authorizing the real estate department to do. I don't think that's an unreasonable request. Right now, the code you cited generally gives 4 options for you to dispose of the property. Hearing the tension about what may happen with this property, the community is uncertain. What I'm hearing is right now it's kind of set up for that direct disposal that direct negotiation with a specified developer. If that falls through because the conversation with the community doesn't turn out like the developer would like, and then you want to go out to bid, then come back so that we can reset the expectations with the community. So without that kind of certainty moving forward, I don't see why we're going to spend more time, frankly.
Thank you, Ms. Zolotel. Next in the queue is Ms. Allard.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel brought up a specific developer. I'm looking at Mr. Trombley right now because I'm going to ask him a question. Do we have a specific developer in mind, or are we just trying to get something moving forward so that we could look at getting more housing in our community? Or what we're looking at?
Through the chair, Ms. Allard, there is a current developer who's interested in the properties. Whether or not, it's not really my determination to say that. I'm not here to pick. I was approached with interest in the parcels. So it's not my decision, but in this case, there is an interested party, yes. Now, whether or not that works out in the long run has yet to be determined.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Thank you, Mr. Trombley. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the amendment to postpone the item to June 7. The amendment to the amendment passes 6-4. We now have the main motion to postpone back before us as amended to June 7. Mr. Trombley?
I would just like to, despite what some may think, as a former member of that body, I have utmost respect for the Assembly as an institution. And I certainly understand the position that you guys find yourselves in on a daily basis. And it is not easy. The vast majority of people do not understand how challenging your position is. I certainly do. One of the things that I wanted to address here is this idea that that there's no understanding of what this parcel is and where it's supposed to be, and is it parkland, is it not parkland. This body works very hard to adopt and approve plans. This body adopted the West Anchorage District Plan. And the reason that we adopt those plans is because it provides a roadmap to the future on how parts of Anchorage are going to develop. To give you an example, if I want to rezone a parcel from R4 to I2, and I look at the 2040 land use plan and it identifies that as a potential rezone, my ability to rezone that is substantially easier because this body's already done the legwork to identify a parcel that should be rezoned in the future. The West Anchorage District Plan shows these parcels as some sort of residential development. It does not identify it as open space. It does not identify it as park space. It does not identify that. It provides the administration and future assembly members the ability to say, this is what was done in the past. It's provided a roadmap for us in the future. So there's a lot of legwork. The community was heavily involved in that West Anchorage District Plan. And it provides a roadmap. So there's nothing nefarious here. There's nothing hidden. There's no backroom deals. I look at the West Anchorage District Plan, which this body approved. It provides a roadmap for me on how we can dispose of land in the future, how it can be rezoned in the future. So I just wanted to address that and understand that I understand the compromise. That's politics. I get it. We need housing. We need economic development in this community, and we've identified some parcels with a very responsible individual who will do it right. There's no doubt. But I just wanted to put those comments on the record. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trombley. I'll go through the queue on the main motion as amended. First is Mr. Constant.
Thank you. So to the speaker out in the public, I'm not meaning to call you out personally, but I heard a statement from a member of the public that said we need to stop fighting over each parcel of land. But then went on to say, except this one. And that's a real terrible thing. That's the reality that we face, that it's every time a decision comes up, we need to do things differently, but not this time because it's mine. And this is a refrain and a theme that I hear echoed over and over and over again through the public process. And so if not this one, then never. Nothing will change, and we will continue to languish in a place where nobody can afford to live except a few who made their money yesterday, because the people making money tomorrow are never going to be able to buy into this system. And they're going to be left to wonder what apartment can they rent, and can they keep making their rent payments as the place deteriorates around them, because we don't allow people to develop housing in this city in a way that's meaningful, that's kind of achieving substantial goals that we've set out. So just remember, when the argument comes around next time, and somebody says, well, we need to stop fighting over each process so that we can start making some progress, but not this one. That everybody wants things to change, but nobody wants to do anything different.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I would characterize this very differently. I believe that almost all of the people that I've spoken to in the neighborhood want this to be developed in some way. And all of the people I talk to see the need for housing and see the need for it to be done right. And so I would say that actually what this is, and I want to thank Mr. Trombley. He and I spoke, and he's attended the meetings. He's been a part of this. So I actually think that this is an opportunity for the community to just have a better conversation about what they want. And I also want to thank the developer who's come forward and who's willing to participate in this in a really thoughtful way. So I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful that this is going to be an opportunity to have a meaningful conversation within this community about what they want. Not everyone is going to be happy with whatever the result is, but everyone will be heard, and they'll move forward with a plan that I think is going to help the community to develop something that's right for them. So actually, I think this is an example of the way it should work, and it's going to take a little longer, but I think it's going to be done right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to postpone AO 2022-21 to the meeting of June 7. The motion to postpone passes 8-2. This item will be back before us on June 7. Next, we have before us item 7B, ordinance number AO 2022-25, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 12.15, to add a section to create a property tax exemption for certain accessory dwelling units, ADUs. The public hearing was reopened on the meeting of February 15, 2022, and has been continued from that meeting and carried over from the meeting of March 15, 2022. Public testimony is now open on this item. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Actually, let's go ahead and call up the one person we have on the phone list. Mr. Turner?
Hello.
Hi, is this Mr. Guard?
It is.
Hi, this is Suzanne LaFrance for the Anchorage Assembly, and you are on for public testimony on AO 2022-25 ADUs. If you go ahead and state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the muni in which you live, you will have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Am I starting now?
Yes, sir, you can go ahead and start now.
Okay, thank you very much. My name's Jeff Guard. My wife's name is Dawn Hawkshurst. We reside at 1431 F Street, South Addition, downtown Anchorage. We're testifying today in opposition of the ADU proposal for the following 4 reasons. We strongly oppose the tax abatement proposal. Last year we paid almost $17,000 in property taxes for 2 small duplexes downtown in the South Addition. This comprises more than 27% of our gross rental income for the year from those 2 properties. Any new ADUs will require municipal services such as emergency services, schools, road maintenance, etc. And giving the new ADUs the tax abatement, you push the cost of those service burdens over on the existing property owners. Excuse me. So we object to that for that reason. The stated purpose for incentivizing this is to create affordable long-term housing. But there's nothing in the proposal so far to stop anybody from collecting these tax benefits and turning it into a short-term rental, like an Airbnb or something. So that's wholly unacceptable. The same follows for the proposal for the muni grants to help defray initial construction costs. These are going to be costs to the city. Those costs will have to be borne by other taxpayers since will not be taxed on the new ADU units. So that would be another cost. The existing taxpayers would be another burden they'd be carrying. And then fourth, for our fourth deal, we're opposed to the relaxation of the parking rules. We already often can't drive down the streets here in residential areas because of car parking here as it is. We get snow buildup in the winter and our driving lanes down the middle evaporate. I've had times already I've had to back up and go around a different direction because there just wasn't room to get a car between 2 of the parked cars on the street already. And relaxing the parking regulations is only going to make that problem worse, which is then going to make it not only harder for us to get around, but it's also going to make more difficulties for public safety, fire and EMS and police. So we may not even be able to get to our tenants or ourselves downtown with the extra
Sir, if you
parking on the street.
Sir, if you could just wrap up, your time is up.
Okay. In closing, we've been trying not to raise the rents on our tenants here and make a stable rent situation with good long-term tenants. But with the proposals that are being made and the tax increases we'd probably be seeing from it, that kind of makes that position an untenable one.
Thank you,
So I don't know that we'd be accomplishing anything we're really trying to accomplish with this.
Thank you.
Except
Sir, thank
shifting
you.
a tax.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll go ahead and go to in-person testimony now. Welcome. Please state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the community in which you live.
Again, Noria Clark, Sand Lake Community Council. Howdy, everybody. As a realtor and as a homeowner here, I am 100% opposed to this. Why should I be paying more property taxes? You know that we have one of the highest property taxes in the entire nation? Right now, a $600,000 house in Scottsdale, Arizona costs the exact same amount as my $300,000 valuation in my property in Sand Lake. That is absolutely outrageous. Why should I be paying $500 a month in property taxes? What you're looking at here, you're talking about how you want to try and expand the tax base on this. KPV, you and I have had this conversation. We talked about how the taxes weren't going to go up. Sorry, now you guys got me angry now. I'm trying to be chill, but that's not going to happen. This is absolutely ridiculous. $500 a month, I could be driving a Tesla. This is crazy talk. Absolutely crazy talk. There's no reason I should be having to pay these valuations. I don't have children, but I support the children. You know why? Because we need to educate our children, right? But I still have to pay those property taxes. So what am I exactly paying for? Why are my roads so dumpster fire right now that all of a sudden all my neighbors are out there, we're all chipping out the ice so that my roads can be better? Where are you guys at on that? Why am I paying so much money? And I'm seeing the cost-benefit analysis of this at this point is absolutely ridiculous. I am not going to continue to pay more property taxes. And the assessor who's going to come out and evaluate my property so that he can try and tell me, because I have a root growing through my sewer system now, which you guys are going to pay to fix, I have to pay about $50,000 to fix. $50,000 out of my own bank account is absolutely crazy talk. This is not okay. Where is the cost-benefit analysis on this? Tell me, just give me 5 seconds here and just tell me, why should I keep paying more in taxes when you guys do absolutely nothing for me at this point? Where are my roads? Where is my house at? Who's going to pay for this? I have to keep paying more money because my valuation went up? Nope. As a realtor, I can tell you the answer is no. The answer is absolutely no. You guys don't get to keep stealing money from us for no reason. I was trying to be calm about the other stuff, but I'm not going to be calm on this at all. Because I am not going to keep paying $6,049.32 a year for what my stuff is. And now you want to have an extra time on exemption? We should all be able to have exemptions. Why are we not treating our veterans better? What are we doing here? This is absolutely ridiculous. Please think about what you're doing in this. The answer is no. No more taxes at this point. I can't afford it anymore. Thank you for your time. I apologize for my anger.
Thank you for your testimony. Actually, hold on, please. Ms. Allard has a question for you.
I'm trying not to be mad.
Hi, Ms. Clark. How you
Howdy.
doing? Okay, so I got a couple questions for you. Are you a homeowner?
Yes.
You have a tax exemption. Do you know?
I do have a tax exemption, actually.
So I believe with this ordinance, it could
So
stimulate...
technically, my tax exemption is $4,000 a year. But I can own a $600,000 property in Scottsdale, Arizona right now, and I could be paying the same amount of money.
I don't have any questions. She's not going to let me get it out. Thanks.
No, I'm sorry. I apologize, Ms. Allard. I'm sorry, Assemblywoman Allard. It's very frustrating because I'm tired of paying taxes and not seeing the cost-benefit analysis of it. It's not a great business plan when it comes down to it. I'm looking at the numbers here. The numbers are not great. So I apologize. I'll actually stand back. Anybody who has questions, I'm willing to answer.
I'll talk to
take a
you.
break.
I'll talk to you later, Noria.
Okay.
That's no problem.
Thank you for your
Madam
testimony.
I apologize. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for your
Thank you,
time.
Ms. Allard. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Welcome. Please state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the muni in which you live.
Thank you. Chair, members of the Assembly, my name is Kathy Gleason. I live in Turnagain, District 3, and I am co-chair of the Turnagain Community Council Land Use Committee. And we have not talked about this specific ordinance and with regard to a tax exemption, but I couldn't resist the opportunity to get up and speak based on some of the testimony of the person who called in and talked about the parking issues. And that was one thing that our Community Council Land Use Committee and then ultimately our council submitted comments when ADUs and some code changes were being proposed for that. Especially older Turnagain north of Western Lights has very narrow streets, no sidewalks. Right now, like Turnagain Parkway, parking is only allowed on one side of the street. So if you had kind of a rush of people having ADUs built on their lots, and all of a sudden that creates more parking demand, and no on-site parking is required, then that means the streets would be used. And so I just wanted to piggyback on that particular element of this whole ADU topic. And so I'm not sure how tax exemption may dovetail into that, and I'll let you be the wiser body to see if it does at all. But to make it easier to do ADUs through tax exemptions, we still have to do a thoughtful look at how ADUs are developed, where they're developed, and what uses, whether it's long-term, turn them into Airbnbs, or if it really provides maybe the ideal goal of longer-term housing for renters who can't afford to buy, et cetera, in certain locations of town. So thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Welcome. Please state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the muni in which you live.
Yarrow Silvers, East Anchorage. I just want to say that today has been a really interesting study on why we don't have affordable housing in this town. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Joseph Nicoma Brooks. I'm on the westerly, the former naval base of West Anchorage, Turnagain. I'm under the impression after the Clutna Glacier Lake was out elemented sources and deposited a oil caustic sludge all across the canals and cemeteries, that my native corporation that has me enlisted to their roster monopolized this civilization at a figure of a couple $billion bank transfers, and they are continually being invaded while their plans, of my impression, is to extrude the oil from this civilization.
Sir, I need to ask you to speak to the item before us, which pertains to accessory dwelling units. I do want to note that at the end of the meeting, time permitting, there is audience participation, and during that time you can speak on any topic.
You want me to talk in a little bit later?
Yes, sir, unless you would like to comment on the proposed ordinance concerning accessory dwelling units.
What does it mean, I guess?
Well, we'll have debate in a little while about that if you want to stick around.
All right, thanks. The public testimony is later in the evening?
The audience participation is. Yes.
All right, sorry.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak?
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, what rule do you believe has been broken?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to suspend the rules. The administration is offering AO 2022-27 as a laid on the table item for the Assembly meeting tomorrow night. This will serve as the required 24-hour public notice to add to the agenda for tomorrow night's special meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Mayor, actually, that motion is out of order. We can take that up later. We are in the middle of public hearing, public testimony for AO 2022-25.
Madam Chair. Right.
I believe after we deal with this item, we can come back to your point of order and address some of the legal issues. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are in the middle of public testimony on AO 2022-25. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
Madam Chair, point of order.
Ms. Allard, what rule do you believe has been broken?
I believe that we are able to discuss what the mayor brought up. I'm concerned that the reason the mayor had brought this up was because the 24-hour notice and the clock's ticking. So for a 24-hour notice, and he asked to suspend the rules, I believe we can second and third that. I'd
Ms.
like
Allard,
to have a legal opinion.
Actually, no. So if it's an ordinance, we cannot take up the ordinance tomorrow, even if you were to notice it tonight. You can introduce an ordinance at any time to set it for public hearing, and we can do that later. That is not time-bound.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. So 7 days' notice to take action on an ordinance is required.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Mr. Mayor, what rule do you believe has been broken?
I'd like to defer now to Blair Christensen, Muni Council. Thank you.
No, we are in the middle of public testimony, and we will take this up item after we have dispensed with your item. We will take it up after we have dispensed with this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Seeing and hearing no one, Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to extend the public hearing to the meeting of April 26th.
Second.
To keep
this current public hearing to April 26th.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. Seconded by Mr. Weddleton. Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was hoping to have a substitute version of this ordinance, and I've been conferring with Municipal Council and the Department of Community Development on this. However, we are working through some issues with the state assessor as well. So as we continue to work through this, our hope is to get this wrapped up shortly, still refer it to Community and Economic Development Committee so that those changes can be reviewed by the committee and then bring it back before the body. And I believe that with an S version, members of the public will be able to testify as to the changes proposed in the S version. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. Mr. Constant, on the motion to postpone?
You know, my motion, I was just going to speak to the item, but you can take me on the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. I see Ms. Johnson in the queue.
Chair LaFrance, I believe it was me.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Christensen.
Thank you. Just in case the wanted more information, Ben Bowman is on the bridge line and can provide a further update if needed.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen. Is there any further discussion on the motion to postpone? Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to postpone AO 2022-25 to the meeting of April 26th.
I'm sorry, can I comment? It's not to postpone, I think it was to continue the public hearing, isn't it?
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. The motion, as Mr. Weddleton stated, is to continue the public hearing to the meeting of April 26th. Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Members may proceed to vote. The motion to continue the public hearing for AO 2022-25 to the meeting of April 26 passes 10-0. We will now take a 10-minute break. ahead and if members would please take their seats, we will go ahead and resume the meeting. We're still missing a few people. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Is Ms. Johnson in the room? Mr. Mayor, I understand that Ms. Johnson was going to take a moment of personal privilege on your behalf.
Yes, Madam Chair, she's in the building. We're trying to find her. Oh, she said she's stuck in the elevator. Okay. Nothing I can do about that except call maintenance.
Oh, thank goodness, not stuck for long. Ms. Johnson, the floor is yours.
Sorry for my delay. So Alexis Johnson, Chief of Staff to the Mayor, through the Chair. I just wanted to speak on this. I had spoken to Assembly Member Chris Constant and Assembly Member Suzanne LaFrance offline, and I understand that, sorry, I'm getting a little shaky. I understand that the rules do not permit us to lay this on the table tonight due to the special meeting and code, but I did want to speak to the item. You know, hearing of Don Young's passing, it took me aback, and the first phone call I made was to the mayor and to our comms team, and then I called Larry Baker, and Larry shared just some wonderful stories, and so we sat around, and the idea came to be like, you know, Don Young was working on the port with us to get this funded, and the port is so important to not just Republicans or Democrats or moderates or anyone. It's important to Alaskans, and I think Don Young was an Alaskan. He was a true representation of what Alaskans are, and so it was my hope to be able to go to DC next week, you know, where Don Young is laying in the Capitol, and to say, you know, we're making moves as an administration, you know, to give ode to who he was as a person, and what better piece of infrastructure than our port. And so I understand the rules do not permit us to lay it on the table tonight, and so I understand that, but I do hope that in the future you guys do support this, this renaming, because it is important to me, it's important to this administration, and I believe Don Young was important to Alaskans, and so thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I see two members in the queue. However, we don't have a motion on the floor. Mr. Weddleton, do you have a procedural question?
Well, it is. I thought you had said, I mean, someone, if it's an ordinance, I thought we could introduce it at any time.
So it's not an ordinance, actually. It's a memorandum. And at this point, I will ask Mr. Gates to address why we are unable to take action on a memorandum and why we are unable to suspend the rules in order to take action on a memorandum that's laid on the table at a special meeting. Mr. Gates?
Excuse me. So the question why we can't act on an Assembly Memorandum tonight that's brought to the meeting tonight, laid on the table, so to speak. The reason is we have code sections that say special meetings get at least 24 hours written notice shall be given designating the date, time, place, and purpose of a special meeting, and tonight is a special meeting. We also have, and this is code section 230, 30B, and then 230, 30G regarding business at an emergency or special meeting says, no business shall be transacted at any special meeting of the Assembly except as specifically stated in the notice of the meeting. And there's a little more, but that's the relevant portion. So we don't have 24 hours notice of this AM for tonight's special meeting. And then the other question is, well, why can't there be a motion to suspend this rule? This rule is a public notice rule. It's a notice of our meeting. It's not a parliamentary procedural rule like a Roberts rule. So it's not exactly a procedural process rule. So I don't think that qualifies in the section that we adopted recently, being able to suspend the rules. So that's what I've advised earlier today, that we're not able to do that for this AM in order to act on it tonight. And then some people did point out that, well, you can do that with an ordinance. And the right for any assembly member to introduce an ordinance at a regular special meeting, it's in our charter, and so that supersedes our code here, and that's why that right is always existent, no matter what our code says. And this is not an ordinance. So I think I made several points there. I hope that helps clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. And an ordinance requires 7 days public notice before taking action. And Mr. Gates, would you also address the time frame for why the AM could not be set on tomorrow's special meeting agenda at this point? Because it actually, would you just go ahead and address that piece?
Sure. Well, the first section I read, 23030B, says 24 hours written notice, designating time, place, and purpose. Our agenda is our notice to the public, and I guess tomorrow's meeting, special meeting agenda says 6 to 8 p.m. We're just kind of past that time frame, but it's not just about stating here or speaking to a mic that we're going to do this tomorrow. It also takes the clerk's staff some time to update the agenda and post it online. So you need a little bit more than a straight 24-hour count to do that for tomorrow night. I'm sorry, but that's just the time frame that we have in our ordinance, in our code.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Ms. Kennedy, do you have a procedural question as well?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Okay, I guess I'm confused then about what kind of a document the mayor was laying on the table if it's not an ordinance. I mean, we talked about the fact that you have to have 7 days for an ordinance, but I'm assuming this isn't an ordinance. So then how does that rule about an ordinance apply then? So,
Mr. Gates?
If I understand right, it's an Assembly Memorandum that's attempting to be laid on the table. The rule about an ordinance in at least 7 days before Assembly action, yeah, that doesn't apply here. This isn't about a 7-day notice period. It's about a 24-hour notice period for a special meeting. Special meetings aren't at a regular time and place, and I think that's the reason why it's a little different if it's a regular meeting where we have laid on the table items. We have these two rules for special meetings in section 230:30. Whether it's an AM or a resolution, not an ordinance, because we have a charter that supersedes this code section. But the code section is 24 hours, and we can't meet that time frame before tomorrow's night's meeting for this AM or anything else that you wanted to put forth, except for, I guess, introduction of an ordinance.
okay, then second
Thank you, Mr.
question.
Go
one more
ahead, Ms.
question?
Kennedy.
Thank you. Tonight's meeting has been billed as a special meeting, but it's really, shouldn't it just been a continuation meeting? So can you speak a little bit to the difference between the fact that we're really just continuing last week's regular meeting, even though we've put on the agenda that it's a special meeting? So which is it, a continuation of the regular meeting, or is this a special meeting? Thank you.
Well, you're probably correct. It could have gone either way, a continued meeting or a special meeting. But the way that it was done last week is we adjourned and set a special meeting, and we continue these items to a special meeting. And so I can't really read that any other way than tonight is a special meeting and the special meeting rules apply. I mean, I don't think that last week when that was done that anybody expected this issue or this matter to come up.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. One of the reasons why we have a special meeting instead of a continued meeting is so that we can close out and adjourn the meeting. So like the meeting of the 15th was adjourned, and then the administration could take action on what the assembly had taken action on. Also, with a special meeting, the phone testimony list is opened again too. So primarily we've done this in the past so that the administration can take action and that those items don't get in that suspended state between continued meetings.
Thank you. I know we've done both in the past. We've had continuation meetings as well. So, okay, thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, and one of the reasons why I have tended to lean now towards special meetings is because we had to go through some procedural gymnastics in order to enable the administration to be able to take action when we had continued meeting to continued meeting, and then we did motions to reconsider. It just seems tidier to wrap that piece up. Okay, so I do have one more member in the queue with a procedural question, and then I'm hoping we can continue with our business. Ms. Allard, what is your procedural question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I would like to know the opinion of the Muni attorney right now. Can I go ask her, can we ask her, I'd like to ask her legal opinion on what Mr. Gates had said.
Concerning the timing of taking action or on noticing a special meeting agenda?
Yeah, this is an extraordinary circumstances. Nobody predicted this was going to happen this week, and I just really want to hear from the Muni attorney.
I will allow that.
Thank
Ms.
you, Madam Chair.
Christensen, would you please weigh in on the matter?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Allard. I think what constitutes written notice can take on a variety of meanings. Obviously, we thought that it was sufficient written notice, but I would defer to Mr. Gates in his opinion of procedure and the longstanding practice of this body, as he has much more experience than I do.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen. Thank you, Ms. Allard. We will now move on to item 7C, resolution number AR 2022-62, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $2,300,000 from earnings within the MOA Trust Fund for expert financial management and support services provided in the calendar year 2022. Public testimony on this item is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is now closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Constant and seconded by Mr. Peterson. Is there any discussion? Seeing no members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AR 2022-62. Item 7C passes 10-0. We now have before us item 7D, ordinance number AO 2021-71S. I will note there's also an S1 and S2 version, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 21.08.050G to allow rolled curbs on residential minor streets. Public testimony on this item, actually public hearing was closed at the meeting of March 1st, and then there was a motion to reopen the public hearing, and the public hearing has been continued from, or this item has carried over from the meeting of March 15. So public testimony on this item is open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony on this item is now closed. Mr. Weddleton?
I'd move the S2 version.
Second.
The S2 version has been moved to approve by Mr. Weddleton and seconded by Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Weddleton?
Yeah, this is much improved. This has been quite an adventure on this one. I think we've spent at least 6 months, 7, 8 months on it. Just kind of kicking it around. You know, vertical curbs fit a important role by keeping cars from parking on the sidewalks. But as we've seen in a couple meetings, that there are times where they add expense, but they don't really succeed in doing that. And this has come around to a place where I think we're pretty comfortable that where they do add benefit that they will be required, but where not that they won't be. And it does give, I think if you look at it on the page 2, the new list of exceptions, Part B has 3 parts, and it says that you don't need vertical curbs where sidewalks aren't required. And then I, where the sidewalk essentially is separated from the curb by at least 3 feet of, vegetation or landscaping. And then the, key point on this one is I, which gives the municipal traffic engineer the ability to look at it and make a determination whether or not the vertical curbs will benefit walkability, or if there are features in the subdivision that kind of speak against it. It's the ultimate goal, as we've said a number of times on this, is a lot of times builders are going in and they get variances so they can do rolled curbs instead of vertical, and they've been successful on that. So that's kind of our cue for changing the code. So what this does is, particularly that III, is gives them essentially that variance opportunity, but much earlier, and they can go to the traffic engineer and see if they can get, if the circumstances would allow them to go with rolled curbs in some cases. The variance would still be there were the traffic engineer to say no. So it helps the builders, timeliness on their projects, and also saves the costs and complications of a variance by working with the traffic engineer earlier in the project. So I urge a yes vote. I think we dialed it in here.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Next is Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some questions for clarification on that 1B section. So my understanding is B1 or B little I, B little I, 2 little i's, those are by right opportunities to have rolled curb, and then the only discretionary piece is the 3 little i's. Is that a correct reading?
Correct.
Okay, then I have some language issues with this, and I'm going to raise them, but I don't know that we need to, I'm not sure if I can come up with a well-crafted amendment. I've been trying. So B says may, so it seems very permissive that it's not by right. Whereas number 3, it is in the discretion of the traffic engineer. So it seems like there's some other folks in the queue, so I'm asking for help if there's any easy clarification. If not, it might want to be an additional cleanup later. My understanding is that there could be potential additional work on this in the future, if I understood some conversations I had with the home builders correctly.
Mr. Weddleton, did you want to respond?
I could. Rolled curb may be provided. If we said shall be, then you would preclude having vertical curbs. So we don't want to do that. So by leaving it may, it's always an option.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. We'll continue through the queue. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, that was the first thing I wanted to note, that the may is directed towards the development community, and we're not trying to preclude type 1 vertical curb. The other thing I wanted to put on the record is, we did hear some concern from some historical neighborhoods, like particularly South Addition. I think Rogers Park would probably fit in this camp too. They're worried that if there's redevelopment, that type 1 curb could be replaced with rolled curb. And I'll say that is not the intention of this ordinance. So if someone in the future is going back and looking at these records, that is not what we are trying to do here. This is for places that don't already have type 1 curb. And I think that the way that these exceptions are written sort of precludes those historical neighborhoods, South Addition, from using rolled curb. But again, I just want to put it on the record, that's not what we're trying to do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. I was intending to make the same point, but I would like to take it a step further. Mr. Lyons, Planning Director, recently confirmed. Come on up. Thank you. Or it could be Bradley Coy as well, either or. It doesn't matter, whoever's job this really is. I just want to make sure we get the department on the record understanding as well. It's not just South Addition or Rogers Park, it's also Fairview and Mountain View and other historic neighborhoods, Government Hill, that are very concerned. And if you drive up Ingora Street and you look to the right when you go from 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th, you'll see these rolled curbs that were put in to save money. And what happens is they are parking for the properties. They are not useful as pedestrian corridors, and so pedestrians now walk in the middle of the streets right next to a federal highway, and people are dying on the streets because of the failure of us to figure this out. So what I read in here, and please, I'm hoping to get on the record to clarify to me that I'm right, is that this is for new subdivisions. It says where required, the subdivider shall. And so we're not talking about the historic neighborhoods that are all completely built, are we?
That is so Brad Coy, Municipal Traffic Engineer, and that is my understanding as well, that it is on the new subdivisions is where the focus is. From the planning side, is there any time when a redevelopment might apply to this that you know?
As far as I know, it's just for new development.
Right, because that verb, or the subdivider, that noun, pretty much ties it to a new subdivision, right? Unless we're going to be aggregating large lots and then restarting and then having subdivision. That's a pretty incredible task. Okay, so we're generally in agreement. You're in agreement. This is not intended to provide a very cheap alternative in neighborhoods that are already suffering from disinvestment.
That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to speak? Seeing no one else in the...
I will say one thing, Madam Chair, really quickly.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Constant.
I'm glad then that this project made its way through the process and that it can provide an alternative in those neighborhoods where it makes sense. So thank you for your hard work and many convolutions it took to get here.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. I'll just move the gavel over to Mr. Constant just to second what he said to Mr. Weddleton and to Mr. Dunbar and to all those in the building community with whom you worked on this process and the many different drafts and versions that you brought forward in the administration. Thank you for the time that you've taken to bring this forward. Appreciate your work.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AO 2021-71S2. Item 7D passes 10-0. Next, we have before us item 7E, ordinance number AO 2022-27, an ordinance adopting the Our Downtown, Anchorage Downtown District Plan 2021 as an element of the comprehensive plan and amending Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21 Land Use Planning Section 21.01.080B1, Elements Table 21.01-1, Anchorage Bowl, and as an update.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony on this item is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Please come forward. Welcome. Please state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the municipality in which you live.
Thank you. Through the chair, my name is Amanda Moser, and I'm the Executive Director of Anchorage Downtown Partnership. Thank you, first of all, to Christine and the entire planning team and Holly and Shanna for the robust, inclusive, and comprehensive process that captured the strong, diverse, and opinionated voices of our downtown community. A strong downtown is critical to a successful Anchorage. When you provide for downtown, you have strong dividends because downtown belongs to everyone. Despite its relatively small share of Anchorage's overall geography, our downtown delivers a significant economic and community impact to both our city and all of Alaska. Downtown punches above its weight class on return of investment when you look at property tax assessment of the downtown core. We offset and provide for Anchorage from Peters Creek to Portage. Our downtown represents and welcomes all residents, employees, and visitors from all walks of life. It is where we gather to celebrate, connect, and occasionally commiserate. Our downtown has suffered from lack of investment and focus as we've watched Midtown rezone from residential and fill up with high-rises, while downtown has become a sea of parking lots and vacant buildings right in the center of our city. We've also borne the brunt of the pandemic, work from home, cancellations, gathering restrictions, etc. When you develop a strong downtown, it makes good fiscal sense. When you look at the cost of development for a strong urban space based on data from Sustainability Prosperity, the cost of a strong urban core per resident is about $1,400, but the cost of developing in rural spaces is about $3,400 per housing. Dense, vibrant core supports cost savings from local government, which benefits all taxpayers because it supports reasonable allocation of resources. Our downtown is crippled by fast-moving one-way streets that serve only to move people out of the space, with semi-trucks killing the vibes of outdoor concerts and movies in the park, or operas or symphonies that we've been hosting at both the Town Square Park and Museum Lawn. We should reimagine these spaces that allow for people to linger and safely traverse, whether by foot, scooter, wheelchair, walker, skateboard, or bike. This plan invites us to be bold and dream big and create a space for our community to be proud of and excited about. As a true dirtbag urbanist, I am really excited about the Downtown Investment Program, Gap Funding Housing Trust, Municipal Downtown Capital Improvement Tax Zone, funding a complete downtown street study, pedestrian-friendly streets. Thank you.
You could finish your sentence.
There's a lot more of other things that I'm excited about. So, in general, I support this plan, and thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Constant is in the queue.
Thank you for your hard work. Ms. Moser, maybe a little bird said some of the things you said about downtown might not sound so great to Midtown or other parts of town when you think about how Midtown has grown into high-rises and downtown has emptied out. What would a message to Midtown be from downtown?
I think in the space where I shared that, I think sort of thinking back historically to urban planning and sort of that those rezones that came before the Assembly in the past 20 to 30 years, Midtown was zoned residential. Like, it was supposed to be a place for folks to live, and downtown was supposed to be a strong urban core. And as Midtown redeveloped and became a mini downtown, it created this sort of space where downtown has less density. And I think one of the strengths that I recognize with Anchorage Downtown Partnership is when you have an organization that is committed to a space, it helps that space to thrive. And I know that Midtown is exploring having a special assessment district and having a Midtown Improvement District and having that voice that will allow that space to thrive. And so I'm hopeful that they'll be able to continue that work.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you for your testimony. Welcome. Please state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the muni in which you live.
Hello, my name is Dr. Daniel Voland. I live in South Addition, where I currently serve as Vice President of our Community Council. However, I'd like to make it clear I am providing testimony in my personal capacity. I'm a downtown business owner. I'm an optometrist. I own an independent eye care clinic on 4th and L. We are a member of the Anchorage Downtown Partnership and the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce. Tonight, I'd like to voice my strong support for the adoption of the Downtown Plan update. Downtown has its challenges, we all know this. However, we should recognize and celebrate our accomplishments and opportunities. There are several recent examples of revitalization in downtown. The Downtown Edge condominiums, Conchi Place and Elizabeth Place, which are both affordable housing developments, the multi-million-dollar museum renovation. Also, my new favorite, the new K Street Market, where locally owned businesses like Fire Island Bakery, That Filling Co. Plant Shop, La Bodega, Johnny's Produce, and Progressive Physical Therapy have all moved to the downtown core to share a vibrant, dynamic new space. I don't know if you've all had the chance to go, but I highly recommend it. You're going to have to wait in a very long line for your coffee or croissant, but it'll be worth it to see how this new space is drawing Anchorage residents downtown to the benefit of all of those businesses who share that space. Other examples, ongoing revitalization and upcoming the construction of the new hotel on 6th Avenue at the Transit Center site and the renovation of the Key Bank Tower on 5th, where that new glass is currently going up. Still, the fact remains, as I know both the Assembly and the administration are well aware, that, as we've discussed tonight, Anchorage is in a housing crisis. This plan update continues to identify the need for denser housing downtown. Housing is economic development. Not only will a greater inventory of affordable and market rate housing units help attract a workforce to live, work, and play in Anchorage, it will help bring foot traffic and new customers to locally owned, growing businesses like mine. New mixed-use development will help more small businesses and entrepreneurs get their start in the urban core. Furthermore, development and redevelopment in downtown creates jobs for our skilled laborers. A recent capacity study recommends a lofty goal of 1,400 new market rate housing units to be built in the next 5 to 8 years. The recommendations of this plan can help developers make that happen. The time for action is now, and we have to consider all options to address this, whether that be extending tax abatements that are currently set to expire in 2024, revisiting downtown zoning code, prioritizing our CIPs, creating public-private partnerships that allow for patient capital or land write-downs, streamlining communication between developers and utility providers, or even bold new ideas like a housing gap trust fund. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome. Please state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the muni in which you live.
Hi, I'm Anna Brawley, and I wear multiple hats, so I just want to clarify. I'm not speaking for the community council. I'm not speaking for my employer, Acknowledgement Consulting, who worked on this plan, and I was not part of that project. And I'm really just speaking as somebody who loves cities. Just to briefly say, I support this plan, and I am aware of the downtown plan. I didn't live here when it was created, but I'm aware that it's 15 years old, and we have still not moved on many of the items that we should. Certainly we have made progress, so I don't want to denigrate the work that we have done. But I want to remind everybody, downtown is Anchorage. So to the comment about whether it's downtown versus midtown, I would encourage all residents of Anchorage to think beyond their neighborhood and to not present us as a city of rival neighborhoods, but as one city. And that downtown is our front porch. It's our civic space. It's where our city hall is. It's where Town Square Park is. It is the original site for our entire community, the original town site of Anchorage. And it is what it is the front face of what we are competing with other cities to present, that we are a great place to live, that we are a center of commerce, that we have cranes in the sky, as people say, that we have a space that's fun to visit and that is really showing off the best of our city. And I also just want to remind people, a lot of people like to talk about Anchorage as being 15 minutes from Alaska, or that we should not be an urban state, that we don't have an urban culture, and those kinds of things. Certainly we have a lot of wilderness and we have a lot of things to offer. But I would also offer that many of my friends, many of my peers, many other people seem to go to other cities and seem to have a lot of fun downtown. In Seattle, in Portland, in Europe, in New York City, in Chicago, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco. These are all great cities, and they invested in themselves to make themselves that way. Some of them, like Chicago, were built from nothing. And they were built up by the people who live there and decided to invest their money and their time and their emotions and their families into making it a great place. And so I would encourage that I think all of the policies in this plan are important, but that really what we need to do is start thinking of downtown differently and really start giving it the love that it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? If so, please come forward. And if there's anyone else, if you would queue up, please state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the community in which you live.
Yara Silvers, I live in East Anchorage. 1,000 market rate units of new housing over the next 7 years. That's all I need to hear. I support this. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Howdy again, Noria Clark. Super exhausted today. You guys keep wearing us down, so that's great. What she had spoken about was Chicago. I was actually born in Chicago. My mother actually did her residency at Cook County, Chicago. She was shot in the streets of Chicago. So when you want to say that Chicago is a great city, I'm sorry, but no, it is not. Chicago is where a lot of destruction happens. We don't want Anchorage to turn into Chicago, because if it does, then guess what? You'll get shot in the streets. That's exactly what has happened in Chicago all of the time. My mother was shot 4 times during her residency. She literally had a patient who came into her ER who, I'm going to try not to be emotional about this, but this woman was brutally raped, and they cut off her arms and her legs, and they tourniqueted her arms and her legs. Because they wanted to keep her alive while they raped her. My mom had to take care of this patient in the ER. We cannot let this be Chicago. Chicago is not a great city. I'm sorry, I have to disagree. Chicago is not a great city. I was born there. It is not a great city. Anchorage is a great city. Anchorage is the best city that we have. What we have to do is focus on what we can try and do to help our people, so that people don't actually cut off people's arms and legs when they brutally rape them, so they can try and keep them alive. That's disgusting. It's not okay. I'm sorry to be so emotional about this, but we need to try and figure out Title 21. We need to try and figure out what we're going to do for our people. And we need to make sure that at the end of the day, nobody ends up like they do in Chicago. My mom has a giant scar on her leg because she was shot. She has 4 bullet holes in her body. She almost lost her leg. So to me, no, Chicago is not a great city. We don't need to implement anything that Chicago is doing. We need to be Anchorage. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome. Please state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the community in which you live.
Hello, James Thornton. I am on the Fairview Community Council Executive Board. I also own a business in downtown in Fairview, which we're also downtown, just to remind everyone. I just wanted to come in support. I wasn't planning on speaking, but I feel like just as I would hope that people would be in support of Fairview's downtown plan, that I'm also in support of the revitalization of the downtown, our economic center, as well as just improvements in general. And actually, if anyone's interested in how downtown areas generally subsidize urban sprawl without proper, getting proper equity, I suggest looking up something called Not Just Bikes on YouTube. It's pretty thick material, but if you're interested in again, how downtown economic cores tend to not really be developed properly, it's a great learning tool. So I am in support of this, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item concerning the downtown comprehensive plan? And insert the audience participation where you can talk about anything is at the end, time permitting, and testimony right now is just on this item. No, actually, not concerning the Capitol. It's concerning the downtown comprehensive plan. If you want to speak about downtown, go ahead, turn your microphone on and state your name, sir. And then if you want to speak about this proposed...
Is it in regards to future site of downtown, like goals for the future of downtown?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm Joseph Nicoma Brooks again. Essentially, we lost the water source. People still come here. We monopolize civilization. We're relying off of precipitation. Downtown can, I guess, hold maybe 400 or 500 people in the hotel registries. They're always from Alaska on their stories. Downtown, if they want to harness a water supply and channel it from El Mandorf Air Force Base Lake that channels it from the glacial on the mountains, then downtown's stealing water from the military, and then the military gets all frustrated. There's more people in the military station on the post than invaders up the highway. Essentially, we got it set up to where we would like to extrude the oil from the ground to try to channel the glacial water that is wasting off in the ocean downpour continuing and rapider. The master plan is not just for downtown of this civilization. However, there is many conflicts arisen in downtown when businesses are open with vanities and luxuries that a lot of people have access to secret networks and syndicates of gang relations and other absurd lewd occurrences. Whenever they're on tourism, leaves of absence were from where they occurred in life before they came across that bridge highway usually, the Kinnick River Bridge access. The master goal for downtown, we're going to try to get the glacial water off the Chugach Mountain, and then we're going to try to get the oil out of the ground. And then in the meanwhile, they got to take it from the military. Then the military has got to get the water from the mountains to the military lake. There's a glacial lake on the military base. They got people living at the military base. They're kind of like our judicial branch of the government that defends practically an Indian reservation. All in the meanwhile, we can't afford to be continually invaded by peoples that can't get a hotel room when we can only provide about an estimate of 800 to 1,000 hotel rooms on a given daily basis if they're not already at no vacancy when we need to go fetch some water to keep a hotel industry going. We're trying to sort this out with the Army Corps of Engineers. We're trying to sort this out with the U.S. government. It's just a timely due process for the master plan of this society. Thank you. Good evening to you all.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony on this item is now closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Move to approve by Mr. Constant.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Rivera.
I'd like to, if I might, move to postpone until April 26th.
Before we do that, could I just make my quick amendment?
Okay, hold on.
I would hold off on that.
So I will go first to Mr. Constant since he got a motion and a second to speak to your motion, and then we'll go to you, Mr. Weddleton. So to the mover of the motion, Mr. Constant.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to make an amendment just to take care of a quick item. It's very subtle and simple, but Mr. Weddleton's desire is to delay. I would love this language to get in there now, just so that when it comes back around in whatever form it is, it's just done. So I guess to that point, I would move my amendment just quick to get it in there. If someone would second, the amendment has been passed out to you. It simply states for Exhibit A on page 59.
And do we have a second?
Second.
So seconded by Mr. Rivera.
It just
Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
adds a discussion that the planning department in working out the future work of our downtown plan should provide a framework for addressing conflicts between nighttime and residential uses. The development protections in identified areas of downtown may be required to address late night impacts such as noise, while providing stronger buffers for existing and future uses. The implementation of policies intending to increase residents in downtown will lead to increased conflicts unless a thoughtful approach is established. And the reason this is important in time is because we just had a conversation on Friday that was very difficult about the impacts between residential uses and nightclub uses in the downtown. And at this point, there's no thoughtful methodology for the planning department to help people get through the process. And so this is intent language that directs the department to begin the process of working on that kind of approach where we can minimize the conflicts and at the same time develop the housing and at the same time allow downtown to have robust nighttime activities.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. And before I go to you, Mr. Weddleton, could I get a motion to extend? We are only...
So moved for half an hour.
Okay, so Mr. Constant has made a motion to extend until 9:30. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Peterson. Is there any opposition to the motion to extend until 9:30?
Madam Chair.
Are you opposed, Ms. Allard?
Yeah, can we extend longer? Because then we're going to interrupt saying extend again. We're not going to be done in a half hour.
Okay, it can be an hour.
A member
till
can
10
make a
o'clock.
motion at any time. I think I heard
I
Mr.
motion
Constant
to
revise
extend
his
and-
motion.
Yeah, I'll revise to 10. It's fine. I don't think we're going to be here all night. There's just a handful more
We
items.
can always adjourn early, can't we? So can we just extend for an hour and a half and call it a day?
Okay, so the motion on the floor
Please.
is until 10 p.m., and I did not hear if Mr. Rivera, okay, Mr. Rivera, I'm sorry, agrees. So, Ms. Allard, did you want to speak to the motion then on the floor?
Yeah, I'd
of
like
extending to 10 p.m.?
Yeah, I wanted to extend until 10:30, so I want a motion to do that.
So you are moving to amend the original motion
From 10
to...
o'clock to 10:30.
Is there a second?
Oh my God, you guys know it's going to happen.
Second.
Do you want to just extend it?
It's fine. I move to extend to midnight.
Second.
Okay,
new
we're
goal.
not going to get anywhere if people start getting crazy with those kinds of motions, Mr. Constant. So, but I think I heard Mr. Constant just say he's fine with...
I think I think he just extended to midnight and I seconded it.
That's not the order. We're going with 10:30. Mr. Rivera had agreed. The motion on the floor is to extend until 10:30. Is there any opposition? Seeing and hearing no opposition, we are extended until 10:30. And now we'll go back to Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Constant just spoke to his amendment. Mr. Weddleton?
I suppose this is fine. I would look, I think there's more careful, detailed work and discussion on the plan that we should have it go to the Community Economic Development Committee and then come back to us, because there's not any real urgency on this point. And I've got quite a number of recommended changes that aren't prepared as amendments, because I think we should postpone. And we could do this now, or we could wait. I think this is fairly loose language, and given more time, could be tightened up, or we can go with this. I don't see the rush, but...
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. And Mr. Trombley, are you in the queue?
Yeah, it would be, through the chair, it would be our planning's request that we just if we're going to postpone this, to postpone the amendment, just so that we can get a full understanding of how this is going to affect, to make sure that it doesn't affect anything else anywhere on the plan. Not that we're not opposed to the amendment, we just want to make sure that it's fully vetted in light of the entire plan. And I think Mr. Weddleton's proposal we'd be happy to attend that committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Trombley. We've got a few people in the queue. Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Thank you. I would really agree that we need to wait and work on this language. Even the term downtown will lead to increased conflicts. I don't think it's appropriate language to be in this. I think that it needs to provide some guidance, but I think that the language needs to be worked on, and if we're going to postpone anyway, there's a perfect opportunity for us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. So I'm going to go to the other members who haven't spoken yet. Actually, you're out of the queue. Okay. Okay, so I'll go actually back to Mr. Whittleton and then Mr. Constant.
Okay, and it's not precisely on this amendment, but the date that I chose to postpone to is further than I think is needed, but there won't be staff available for our CDC meeting a week before then, so it's really to accommodate staff timing. Mr. Davis and Ms. Bunnell will be out of town, so otherwise I would have just made it our next meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, I'm just notifying you all, I'm now working on an ordinance to address the concern that this amendment is about. So you may think it's out of order, but the ordinance may make it before the plan does. And so just FYI. Because if Friday didn't teach us anything, we have a problem downtown.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. So we have a motion on the floor to approve the amendment, and then of course the main motion is to approve. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I just want clarification on the process here because obviously we either need to make that actual motion to postpone right now or we will be voting on this particular amendment. And I'm not sure Mr. Constant wants a no on it. So anyway, I guess I'm just looking at what the potential process could be right now in terms of postponing without voting down the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Weddleton, if you are inclined, you may go ahead and make the motion now to postpone.
Okay, prior to voting on the amendment, we can do that? Okay, so I'd move to postpone until April 26th.
Second.
A motion to postpone until April 26th has been made by Mr. Weddleton and seconded by Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Weddleton, did you want to speak any further to it?
Actually, I may have done it. Maybe I should say continue the public hearing. I guess reopen and continue the public hearing until April 26th.
And does the second agree? So the motion is to reopen the public hearing and continue to the meeting of April 26th. I'll go through the queue. Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you. Question for Mr. Weddleton. What are you hoping to get out of the postponement that we didn't cover in the work session? Because we had a fairly comprehensive work session on this item.
Some of the things that would change. One is the tone of it. The overall is very dismal. For downtown, it's kind of sad. You read this thing and it talks about industrial gritty feel, as most people would agree. So I don't think Anchorage is that way. So there's a variety of things like that, but there's also some questions that were brought up in some of the comments, if you go through, and many of them were rejected, that maybe have a lot of validity. I think Sean Debenham had some points that we should be discussing and looking at more carefully to help bring more development. The overall broad view is that we will encourage development in downtown, but then the precise requirements speak against that, actually, and make it somewhat harder. There's also some things in there that need to be pulled out because they're outdated. It refers to some things, like it talks about setbacks. Well, we 2 weeks ago took away the setbacks. So there's things like that, just so a lot of it's just clean up, and some of it are some bigger issues.
Go ahead, Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate your preciseness. I'm a little bit concerned about having that conversation without the folks who weren't in the development, like the community that developed the downtown plan, because it feels like then we're kind of coming in after the fact with the Assembly's vision of the downtown plan. So do you have any ideas on how this process you would like to go through to clean up some of the, not just the Scribner's errors or any inconsistencies, but have that conversation around the tone and the concerns that could include those who were substantial participants in the downtown plan?
Well, that's one reason for continuing the public hearing, is so that we could get, I think the amendments I would put forward would be done probably in the next 10 days or so and could be made available. And we'll also have the Community Economic Development Committee, and then we can address it at the continued public hearing and then perhaps continue it. But I would say, we are the Assembly, and we do have the final say in looking at these things. The rest of the process is essentially advisory to us. So it's not wrong for us to look at these and go, I think they missed the mark. I don't propose anything in here that's dramatically that way. I think this is a continuation of a plan that was 14 years or more, 15 years old, and it just makes some little changes here or there. But we should look at this without feeling like our hands are tied.
May I make a final comment? Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you providing that context. I'm not sure I support that based on how I've heard the Hillside District Plan talked about, and that the Hillside District Plan is reflective of the neighborhood's values, and it's used a bit as a shield to any changes along the hillside. The Hillside District Plan, for me in Midtown without any district plans, is one that I look at and go, that would be a really great tool for our residents as well. So I think at this point, I would prefer to just move forward with this, because if there are things that have to be reconciled in the downtown plan because they don't conform to things that we've passed in the last 2 weeks, I think those could be handled separately. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. Mr. Constant?
Thank you, and just following on with what I just heard Ms. Zalatel say, I can't disagree with any of it. And I feel blindsided just in the sense that while I heard in one framing, these are little changes, but then I heard in other ways, we want to go back in and redo the whole tone of the plan. And I am confused about how those two things can simultaneously be true. And so I think that I am with Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you, Mr. Constant, and we'll go back to Mr. Weddleton, and then hopefully we will vote on the motion. Mr. Weddleton?
All right, thanks. The Hillside District Plan did have changes made to it at the Assembly, because that's the Assembly's job. If Mr. Constant would like to have his downtown plan, which he represents, say that most people would agree that Anchorage is industrial and gritty, I'd be surprised, because that shouldn't be in there. And there's other phrases in there that just talk about how the downtown is empty and derelict and an unpleasant place to be. And I don't find it that way. I don't think that's the aspirational things that you want in your plan. If you've read it, you would have noticed that, because it jumps out. So these are just a few things to change. You can leave them in there if you want. We don't write about that in most of Anchorage, but I don't think this is ready for prime time. It needs to have some more work done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to reopen the public hearing for AO 2022-27 and continue to the meeting of April 26. The motion passes 7-3. This item will be back before us at the meeting of April 26. Next, we have before us item 7F, ordinance number AO 2022-36, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21, Chapters 21.03, review and approval procedures, 21.04, zoning districts, 21.06, dimensional standards and measurements, 21.07, development and design standards, and 21.115, rules of construction and definitions. Thank you. In order to amend the 2 1/2 story limit and related dimensional standards in the R2A, R2D, and R2M zoning districts. Public testimony on this item is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? If so, please come forward and state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the municipality in which you live. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Assembly. My name is Kathy Gleason. I live in Turnagain, District 3, and I'm Turnagain Community Council co-chair of the Land Use Committee. And we did review this. It seems like it was pre-pandemic, so we know it was over 2 years ago. And I honestly don't remember exactly what kind of input we provided at that time. And during COVID, I was not attending P&Z meetings and this and that, so kind of things dropped out of our radar screen. And so I know we had some concerns with regard to, solar daylight hitting adjacent yards and so forth if the R2 height is increased, the allowable height is increased. But I think the way they have staggered some of the requirements, it addressed that mostly. And so I really wanted to take this opportunity to thank Tom Davis from the Planning Department, who, when we were meeting in person, attended more than one Land Use Committee meeting and Turnagain Community Council meeting to talk about these things and try and address our issues, answer questions, got our input, and so that really, he's just been a really wonderful person from the Planning Department to work with community councils like Turnagain. So thank you again, Tom, and all the other Planning Department staff who works with community councils on these things. And in fact, we're going to be meeting again on the 30th of this month, and I believe in person for the first time in probably 2.5 years. So we welcome and look forward to having Tom come to us to talk about more Title 21 amendments. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony on this item is now closed. Mr. Weddleton?
Move to approve.
Move to postpone to the meeting of the 26th of April.
Second to
Mr. Dunbar.
Madam Clerk, could I get the instant replay, please? Okay, so Mr. Weddleton had made a motion to approve, and then I heard a motion to postpone.
And I said Dunbar, but I meant Weddleton.
You seconded the motion to approve? Okay, so Mr. Weddleton's motion to approve was seconded by Mr. Constant. So Mr. Weddleton, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, it can be postponed, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Ms. Zalatel.
Yes, I'd move to postpone this item to the meeting of April 26th.
Second.
So a motion to postpone to the meeting of April 26th has been made by Ms. Zalatel and seconded by Mr. Rivera. Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we've discussed this ordinance with our community councils in Midtown, a variety of them, many want more time. They want to understand, particularly around the bulk setbacks and shadowing in particular. There are a lot of concerns about that. I understand this is something from kind of the before times, but we need time to refresh our community council's memories, especially those where it may impact, at least with the vocal community councils we've heard from, gardening. That is a very specific concern, the light and whether it will shade. It's a very short growing season, and taking this up when the light is just barely coming back, has them all very concerned because they don't want their gardening season shortened any further. How to balance that against the housing opportunities. So we would like some time to be able to get some more information so we can go back and talk with our community councils, or have the opportunity for a work session so we can be fully briefed as we go back to our community councils.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. And just for clarification, your motion did not include reopening the public hearing, correct? Okay, thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to hear from someone from the administration, whether it's Tom or even Adam, about this reform impacting this year's building season. Do we anticipate that the housing opportunities or the improved building opportunities that Meg references could happen this year if we pass this ordinance tonight?
Yes, Tom Davis, Planning Department. We believe that one way or the other at this point, we wouldn't have a big impact on this year's building season, mostly because a lot of buildings are being designed in one year to be built in the next. And at this point, whether it's adopted a month later or not, I don't believe we'll have an impact at this point.
Okay, great. Wait, Tom, just to be clear, you said it would not impact this.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think that we're in the peak, going into the peak building season now, and so buildings have been designed or permitted for this season.
Great, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Constant?
This is all Groundhog Day. Around and around and around and around and around we go. Housing will never be built in Anchorage, Alaska in any meaningful amount.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to postpone AO 2022-36 to the meeting of April 26. The motion to postpone passes 8-2. This item will be back before us at the meeting of April 26. We now have before us item 7G, ordinance number AO 2022-40, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Title 1, Title 3, Title 9, Title 11, and Title 25 to create the Airports Department. Public testimony on this item is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony on this item is now closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve the S.
Second.
A motion to approve the S version has been made by Ms. Zalatel and seconded by Mr. Constant. Ms. Zalatel, did you want to speak to this motion?
I'll speak briefly primarily to the S version and why I brought an S, and that was with the help of the Municipal Attorney's Office and the Department of Community Development. So that just really clarifies that we're talking about the potential for multiple municipal airports. It still does everything that the administration originally put forward, and it just took out some gender-specific language on page 4. That's really the change there, because it could be done without referencing whether or not an airport manager might be a man or a woman. So those were the primary changes in the S.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AO 2022-40S. Item 7G passes 10-0. We now have quasi-judicial items before us. These next items on the agenda involve applications for a liquor or marijuana license and/or a special land use permit for alcohol or marijuana. The process to review these items is different than the Assembly's legislative role because these are administrative or quasi-judicial hearings and require the Assembly to be impartial, refrain from ex parte communications, except in liquor license applications, and make a decision based only on the record before us and testimony here today. We now have before us item 8A, resolution number AR 2022-81, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding a new beverage dispensary tourism liquor license number 6015 and restaurant designation permit for AKQOZB LLC DBA Aloft Anchorage Midtown. Thank you. Public testimony on this item is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony on this item is now closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve has been made by Mr. Rivera and seconded by Ms. Zalatel. Is there any discussion? Seeing no members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AR 2022-81.
Ms. Allard?
Item 8A passes 10-0. We now have before us item 8B, resolution number AR 2022-83, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding a new beverage dispensary duplicate liquor license number 6019 and restaurant designation permit for Hickle Investment Company DBA The Cubby. Thank you. Public testimony on this item is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing nobody, public testimony is now closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve has been made by Ms. Allard and seconded by Mr. Constant. Is there any discussion? Seeing no members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AR 2022-83. Item 8B passes 10-0. We now have before us item 8C, resolution number AR 2022-86, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of restaurant eating place liquor license number 5635 for Falina East LLC DBA Falina Downtown. Thank you. Public testimony in this item is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony in this item is now closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Ms. Allard and seconded by Mr. Constant. Is there any discussion? Seeing no one in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AR 2022-86. Item 8C passes 10-0. We now have before us item 8D, resolution number AR 2022-87, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of beverage dispensary tourism liquor license number 5707 for ASA Beverages LLC DBA Alaska Lounge. Public testimony.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony on this item is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony in this item is now closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve has been made by Mr. Constant and seconded by Ms. Zalatel. Is there any discussion? Seeing no members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AR 2022-87. Item 8D passes 10-0. We now have before us item 8E, resolution number AR 2022-88, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of club liquor license number 3187 for Anchorage Curling Club, Inc., DBA Anchorage Curling Club, located at 711 East Loop Road, Anchorage, Alaska, 99501, pending satisfaction of municipal requirements. Thank you. Public testimony in this item is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony in this item is now closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Mr. Constant and seconded by Ms. Zelatel. Is there any discussion? Seeing no members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AR 2022-88.
Are you waiting on someone?
Jamie. Ms. Allard? Item 8E passes 10-0. That brings us to audience participation. We didn't have initial audience participation, so that does not apply. So for audience participation, please direct your comments to the assembly or the chair. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and personal attacks are not appropriate. In addition, audience members are asked to avoid clapping or other disruptions during audience participation. If you wish to speak, please come forward and state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the municipality in which you live. Okay, we now will move on to assembly comments. And we'll start with Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No comments tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No comment.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Ms. Zelatel?
No comment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Zelatel. Mr. Constant?
No comments for me, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to say that we're heavily into the election process. I got my ballot finally yesterday. I was starting to be concerned, but I did get it yesterday, put it in the mail today, and hope everyone will do that and vote early. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Rivera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No comment.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also got my ballot yesterday and turned it in as I pulled into the parking lot here today. So I'm encouraging everyone else to get those ballots, fill them out, and don't forget to sign them. And if you don't happen to have a stamp, use the drop box. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Ms. Allard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yep, I want to reiterate what my fellow colleagues have said. Get out and vote. Vote early. If you have any questions, call me. My number's listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Weddleton?
No comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned. And it's 9:24.